We have we're still waiting for several people.
Yeah, I see. I see.
Just waiting for 3 more, Megan.
Okay, sounds good.
Just waiting for 3 more, Megan.
Okay, sounds good.
Just waiting for 3 more, Megan.
Okay, sounds good.
Just waiting for 3 more, Megan.
Okay, sounds good.
Megan, we have a quorum.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Just ask them what to give me a second to join in. Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 1347th meeting of the Wachusett Regional School District School Committee. We're meeting tonight on Monday, July 13th, 2020, here at 7 p.m. We're going to start tonight with public comment. I already have 4 comments that have come through in the past day. To fellow members of the public who are watching, please forward all questions to the email questions@wrsd.net at any time during our meeting tonight, and I'd be happy to read them at our second public comment section at the end of our meeting. So to start off tonight, I'm going to read a comment from Lauren Salomon Garrett, who lives at 49 Cook Street in Holden. She says, I thank you all for the incredible amount of work that you have done since the pandemic closed our schools and the work yet to be done with the budget and reopening plans. It's been obvious from the science that COVID-19 is already spreading again. Our R0 rate is rising in Massachusetts, 1.07 today when it was 0.99 last week. Anything above 1 is not good. As opposed to the spread decreasing with hopes of opening schools fully, moving towards restrictions again, although this is not how DESE is framing that guidance. This is why Wachusett's remote plan for 2020-21 must be robust and consistent. They need to align with curriculum, and students must have regular face-to-face contact with teachers and staff. All this will take great time and effort to coordinate, so I hope that you do not waste time drawing up desk diagrams like DESE wants you to do and get down to the real business, educating our children on how to wear, not how to wear masks and wash their hands, but rather in curriculum and content. Commissioner Riley made it clear that districts have to fully provide a full remote plan for families. I, as an at-risk person, may go this route and may not be sending my kids back into buildings in the fall. I want to know that this plan is good as any plan for returning to school. You've got 7 weeks as of right now. I hope that you use this time to come up with plans to support and train our teachers and staff, get technology in place, and create the best scenario for every learner in our district. I, like many, want my kids back in school with their friends and teachers, but it's just not realistic. Please use the little time you have wisely. Secondly, tonight, we're hearing from Mary Shepard, the new president of the Wachusett Regional Education Association, located at 1320 Wachusett Street in Jefferson. She states, as I develop my visions for this role I chose to accept, I see a kinder community, and it begins with every one of us in this meeting. The global pandemic, COVID-19, has brought to light in the many divides and inequalities of our current society is blighted with, is pushing us to face and to walk alongside things that make us uncomfortable. Hello, people. This is where the true growth begins for our students, pushing them beyond their comfort zone. Let us be like a student. My leadership vision of a kinder community begins on 2 fronts. The first being the pandemic and the importance of returning to school safely at the appropriate time. Conversations are happening on this front, and I stay current by reading social media posts, guidelines from DESE, and proposals from the MTA. Second are the racial and socioeconomic injustices exposed like a zit popping during the pandemic. This popping zit requires immediate attention. So where's our district leadership on Black Lives Matter? We've heard from many minority students who have walked through the judging walls of our schools, and my heart was saddened listening. Looking at former Chair Ken Mills' weighted expression after reading those letters was a wake-up call. However, I think our district is stirring, and the deafening silence is making us late. You must choose to be leaders on this front. These students demonstrated strength in showing the human side of vulnerability, asking us to be kinder. Let us teach kindness and fill all our hearts. In my first grade classroom, I've seen the blatant discrimination between peer students, one Black and one white. To this day, I'm not sure if I handled the situation correctly, but I'd rather show up imperfectly than stand by silently. My first education center diversity class came after this incident, where I learned that we all have work to do to expand our knowledge of race and multiculturalism to ensure that our students feel represented and heard during their time with us. How do we as a district foster a sense of multiculturalism and anti-racism? It begins with our curriculum. In my class, I've developed an approach to teaching art through the artist, introducing artists of other races and discussing the physical difference between the artist, myself, and the classroom students. This summer, one middle school teacher is reading many age-appropriate literatures on racial inequities to use in her classroom, and one high school teacher is designing a course on the history of race and racism in the United States. But the speckled approach to educating our students on the broad subject of systemic racism must take a district-wide approach. It should begin with the training of our staff, all staff. When I was sharing my diversity class experiences with the paras one day, they asked, why don't we have any PD like that? We can use that information, and I agreed. Racism is deep. My undergraduate degrees in urban studies delved into the many challenges Black and brown people face. And in my opinion, in almost 40 years that have passed, it's gotten worse. In life, there are no erasers, but as Louise Hay, one of my favorite authors, would say, the mind needs cleaning, just like our closets every so often. So I invite you to join me in changing the conversation to embrace the uncomfortable, because we all, especially our shunned students, whether because of the color of their skin or the clothes they wear, deserve a sincerely kinder community. And it begins with listening and sharing each other's stories. I want all Wachusett students to know they fit in our community and we have their backs. Next, we're hearing from Corey Burnham Howard, who lives at 11 Osgood Road in Princeton. She writes, Dear Superintendent McCall, Deputy Superintendent Burlow, and school committee members, I'm writing as a concerned and invested member of the WRSD community to share my thoughts on reopening schools for the 2020-2021 school year. I have voiced my concerns, as have many others, in online social media forums. Realize that vocalization can't reach you. I've also shared my thoughts on the WRSD Reopening Task Force survey that was sent to the community. I realize my comments in that survey may not also reach you. I express to my friends my concerns, and some reassure me there are many smart, dedicated people working on a recommendation for how school will operate come September. I realize there are also many smart, dedicated people who have not been included in the conversation. The WRSD Reopening Task Force was created without a call for volunteers, but by appointment. The WRSD Reopening Task Force survey was sent to the community a month ago, but results of the survey have not been shared with the community. I understand by June 24th, the task force already presented its findings to the administration, and yet those recommendations have not been shared with the community. I see that other school districts are hosting forums for parents and for teachers that may be involved to offer valuable perspectives, feedback, and ideas. Here in the WRSD, the lack of communication and lack of parent-teacher involvement and recommendations could pretend to be a large issue in the acceptance and cooperation in whatever successful implementation of any final action plans, whatever they may be. While my singular opinion might not have any influence, and while it should not be given its own, the thousands of people in our community, I feel compelled to share it since the health and education of our children are at stake. In my opinion, the only safe, realistic, impenetrable option will be that will be sustainable for any length of time and will ensure academic rigor is remote learning. Any other option seems unrealistic when considering safety and risk with education, given inadequate funding, current teacher-to-student classroom ratios, old HVAC systems, shared bathrooms, shared buses, and the general nature of children to be intimate in their socialization, and the general environment needed for successful in-person education, coupled with the current exponential increase in COVID cases nationwide and the CDC guidance and considerations related to the risk of COVID-19 spreading in schools. If the WRSD School Committee can or does not feel safe meeting in person at this time, how can you expect our children and staff and teachers to meet in person for 6 hours a day? I understand all the reasons advocated for in-person despite the pandemic, from educational quality to student socialization and development. But as you know, this will not be a return to normalcy. I think the focus needs to be on the health, safety, of maintaining academic rigor. Remote learning planning needs to be a primary focus. If there is a return to the school building, I assume that if one person in a school building is diagnosed with COVID-19, the building will be shut down for some period of time and remote learning will be the default. If there is a return to the school buildings, I assume that if cases spike in Massachusetts, the school buildings may again be ordered to be closed. While remote learning was an emergency measure implemented last spring, it was in general, despite the best efforts of many teachers, neither adequately planned or executed to a normal degree of academic rigor. That was accepted and understood by the nature of the pandemic emergency. But now, months later, with remote learning the best option for consideration and likely the default in any scenario, there's been time to plan for a rigorous remote learning program. No matter the decision to be made on the path forward with regard to school opening, the decision needs to be made now and shared with the community now. Understand these are unprecedented times that the state and federal guidance may shift and continues to be forthcoming. I understand the need for careful consideration and deliberate decision-making, and I do appreciate the efforts in that regard. But now is the time for the decision to ensure successful implementation of a start to a school year that's just in 6 weeks. Leadership is about making tough decisions and executing those decisions. Again, decisions need to be made now and shared now, not sometime in August, so that teachers and parents and students can make decisions on whether they feel safe returning to the school building. Teachers can prepare lessons on the chosen format. Families can plan work and life schedules, and WRSD investments of time and energy and resources can be made to ensure adequate resources for and successful implementation of the chosen plan. Thank you for your consideration and your continued efforts on behalf of the school committee. Be well, Corey Burnham Howard. Finally, we hear from two invested parents, Sarah Smith and Benjamin Smith, who live at 47 Birchwood Road in Holden. They say, as parents and concerned residents of the district, we are again writing to express our concern and displeasure about the proposal to pay AA transportation 75% of the money the district would have been paid for the service during the COVID shutdown period. It is important to note that paying for services not rendered has long been illegal and only recently become legal under emergency legislation signed by the governor on June 5th. This speaks volumes on whether or not such actions are in the public interest. Clearly, spending taxpayer money for nothing in return is not in the public interest. But these are unprecedented times, and it is understandable that the law was changed to help vendors who are at risk of becoming financially insolvent. However, this does not excuse the school committee from its responsibility to perform financial due diligence on the behalf of the students of the district and the taxpayers of the towns. It is vital that the school committee and the school district are confident that AA transportation is indeed at risk for significant financial insolvency before committing tax dollars for services that were not delivered. Anything less would be a dereliction of your fiduciary responsibility to students and taxpayers. To date, the district administration has been unable to demonstrate AA's financial vulnerability. This is not the administration's fault, but rather the owner of AA Transportation, Mr. Ron Irwinstein. Mr. Ron Irwin has been unwilling to share company financial information that would demonstrate the need for the 75% figure he is demanding. If he has concerns about the sensitivity of disclosing financial information, an independent financial analysis by a CPA could be conducted and should be a precondition to settling at any amount. In the absence of financial documentation offered by AA, there are some reasons to doubt the claim that the company needs a 75% figure that was presented in the ultimatum. 1, AA Transportation has argued they need the money to protect their employees, but AA bus drivers were laid off and presumably receiving unemployment, including state and federal bonus money. 2, fuel is a substantial cost for a transportation company, but during the shutdown period, the company was not using any fuel. 3, between the last school committee meeting and this meeting, the Federal Small Business Administration has made their reports public. Local reporting has shown AA Transportation received federal relief assistance. The SBA figures do not report an exact amount, but AA Transportation was listed as receiving over $2 million in PPP aid. Some district administration and committee members seem concerned that AA Transportation might refuse to provide bus service next year if we do not meet demands. Those in support of paying 75% frame their argument around the importance of maintaining an amicable relationship with partners. Yet during the June 17th Finance Subcommittee meeting, one member described the district as being backed into the corner. Our district business director stated that if we don't agree to 75%, he was told that the owner of AA Transportation would do what he has to do. Is this the behavior of a quote-unquote community partner? No, this sounds like a threat. Though the concerns mentioned at previous meetings are understandable, they should not drive hasty and uninformed decisions. A decision of this magnitude worth over $1 million cannot be made without full cooperation and transparency from the vendor. Besides, we're in a multi-year contract for the company. Surely the contract has protections in place for the district and avenues of financial and legal recourse for breach of contract. Further still, the threat to pull out the contract seems to undermine their claim of financial vulnerability. Companies in desperate need of income don't willingly drop clients. In closing, it is clear the school committee does not have the information needed to make a fiscally responsible decision at this moment due to lack of transportation by AA Transport. If anything, the last revelation that AA just received $2 million and possibly aid and possibly supports the need to legitimize the negotiated amount. Despite the good news that the school budget passed and state aid figures remain uncertain, WRSD already laid off 52 teachers and other staff and is planning for additional cuts that would total about 148 teachers and related staff. These cuts include and aren't limited to eliminating music for elementary and world language for middle school. This is a serious loss for our students. How many classes or programs could we be funded with $1.2 million the committee is considering paying the bus company? The school committee is literally facing a choice to either provide programs for students or blindly pay AA transportation for services never delivered. As parents, this is no contest. Our money should be going to ensuring kids have access to music class, world language programs, teachers, and counselors who will help them recover and thrive in these challenging times. We understand this is not a simple decision. We're just absolutely appalled at the apparent bullying behavior of the bus company, who, according to a member on your committee, has backed you into a corner. We urge the committee to do the right thing, not the easy thing. Remember, the district is the customer, and AA is not in the position to issue an ultimatum. Offer a fair payment based on information and clear evidence. Do not be cowed by threats. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you so much for all members of the public who did email tonight. And again, if you have comment that you have not already emailed, please feel free to do so at questions@wrsd.net. Okay, so welcome tonight. I do have some opening remarks to offer, and then I will be yielding my floor to our student reps and then to Dr. McCall. So to begin tonight, and I'm sorry that I'm not as brief as I always like to be, but I've had opportunity over the last 2 weeks to really kind of sit and to think about my new role here on the committee. I wanted to say welcome tonight, and first, welcome back to member Melissa Ayala, who has been appointed by Sterling and is returning to our committee. Thank you so much for coming back and giving us a full committee to move forward with. It really has been an awesome couple of weeks for me. By stepping into this new role as chair, I've taken an opportunity to step back and consider my own foundation as an educator, constituent, and a parent. That foundation is firmly rooted in our country's promise of education. That is, we have a commitment to fulfill our collective responsibility to provide an opportunity for academic, social, and personal success to every student who walks through our doors. We believe in this promise because it is the primary means by which we support all children to craft their dreams for the future and to equip them with the tools they need to achieve those dreams. Moreover, this type of high quality, rigorous, equitable education serves as the anchor of our democracy and thus acts as our true moral imperative for each and every one of us who support our students. To fulfill that promise as a committee, we must be committed to our charge. First, to set policy, and second, to direct the goals of the WRSD. As such, during our time tonight and moving forward, we must be succinct and inclusive to all school committee members. As you've seen tonight, I've set aside 2 items from the superintendent's report to initially focus our discussion on. Once those items have been covered, we will open the floor to further discussion. As stated in our bylaws, comments and questions by members should be limited to 2 minutes, and I will be reminding members of that time limit. I will also be asking that follow-up questions be held until all are able to speak. Okay. Finally, please ensure that comments raised in our chat feature here on Google Meets are limited to hand raises or points of order in order to adhere to the open meeting laws tonight. I do also want to make note that Business and Finance was unable to meet tonight previous to this meeting due to lack of quorum because of emergencies of a number of members. Thus, questions and comments regarding the bus contracts will be postponed to our next meeting, as will items 4 and 5 on our agenda tonight. With that being said, do our student reps have a report they wish to offer?
I'll be really brief, really just quickly. There's not really much to say. We're all on break for the summer, so we're really just enjoying our break. We're just like waiting for answers from you guys, and we're just trying to communicate better right now. Me and Kanisha are working together on that to try to communicate better what we learn here so the students do get some sort of answers and just to make it more connected for all of us. That's all I have.
I don't have much to say either.
All right, thank you guys, and thanks for joining us tonight. Superintendent McCall, would you like to take it away?
Sure, thank you. So welcome everybody. I appreciate the feedback that was shared with us this evening from some of our constituents. I have received many emails from parents, a few from staff, just around where we are in terms of the opening and what our next steps are going to be. So first and foremost, what I did want to do is again review the Director Keenan has a PowerPoint presentation that goes back to the findings of the task force. So what I'm going to do is have Director Keenan run through the PowerPoint. I do have another slideshow as well, real quick after that DESE shared with us a week and a half ago. And one of the things I would like to do is just, again, review that at the same time. So Director Keenan, if you want to pull your screen up and you can start your presentation, that would be great.
You're muted.
Thank you very much. Now you can hear me. Sorry about that. The last task force meeting, the last school committee meeting, I went over just a brief overview of the task force. And at that time, we were working on the final report. So in tonight's attachments, you'll have the full task force report that was put together by the group. And tonight, I'll just be going over some of the general details because it would be impossible to go through everything in detail. But just to give the whole school committee and the public more of a glimpse into the work of the task force, it's really important that that work is out there for everyone to see. Also, on the website for people in the public, the task force recommendations report will be made available on the district website. And that should be up tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest. So again, just to go over who we had on the task force, we had a group of about 35 people, a stakeholder group that we put together deliberately. We did miss some constituents in putting this together so quickly, which is something we're going to correct as the task force goes forward. School nurses, we had central office administration and school principals and assistant principals. Faculty and staff that the WREA helped us identify and put together. Parents and students who really added a lot to our discussions. The parents also, many of them were our medical doctors working in the field. We also have somebody who is a late addition parent who connected with us through the survey, actually. And that person is on the committee at UMass Memorial for their COVID response and is already bringing a lot of helpful suggestions. Medical professionals, school nurses, again, were a big part of that. Mental health professionals, including the director of the UMass Medical Trauma Child Training Center, Jessica Griffin, who's also a parent in our district. Really is amazing the wealth of knowledge we have in our parent group. And school committee members, last but definitely not least. We had 3 school committee members that were on the task force. So the goals of the task force were to develop a set of recommendations for the fall 2020 school potential reopening, focusing on student health, emotional, and academic domains. And just to put this in context, in June, we had, during the work of this task force, we didn't have any guidance from the Department of Ed yet. So we really were going off of plans from other states, including Maryland, and guidance from the CDC and other reputable sources. So number 2, we reviewed state and federal guidance for reopening schools in a safe manner, collected and consolidated local stakeholder feedback about what is needed for a safe school reopening. At the end of this presentation, I will get more into detail on those results and to explore possible contingency plans for reopening schools. And we did this last time, but it's just these are the different focus areas of each meeting. And it was a really ambitious timeline. We had to do a lot in a short amount of time, and we were able to meet that deadline for the final report. These are the major domains that we looked at. The ones at the top are were the most pressing and the ones that we spent the most time on. Student health and adult health and medical, mental health and academics. And you can see the subdomains are still pretty ambitious tasks, but again, they are all in the service of those 3 main domains at the top. Communication plan is one that is going to be really, really important as we roll out finalized plans as the district plans, because this 2-way communication, not only through the task force, but just through regular conversation with all the stakeholders, it's going to be really, really important to make sure we're on track. So in terms of the health and medical group that worked, these are just some of the highlights. Again, the details are going to be in the task force report. These are just some of the overarching themes that they came up with. They recognized that they could not eliminate COVID-19 risk to staff, students, and community. And this is something it's one of these harsh realities that we realized through our conversations, that total elimination of risk is not possible, unfortunately. But that the group looked for opportunities for risk reduction. And this is directly from their work. We are not necessarily limiting our recommendations to resource or budgetary limits of the WRSD. Basically, their recommendations were not constrained by any budget limitations. They were really just looking at what is being recommended. So they did recognize that they may not be feasible given budgetary limitations. The major areas they focused on were prevention, screening, surveillance, which is monitoring, and supplies and PPE. They did a really nice job with this, looking at the ways that we can support all stakeholders via providing information, training, and responding to questions and concerns as they arise. Information is, knowledge is power, and I think in this case, knowledge and understanding what the district plan is as we get to the rollout of it really will help, because it will help people understand what their options are and help parents understand what their options are. A very useful activity that this group did was they looked at different protocols and procedures that are available and adapted them as drafts for our district. This was a big, a heavy lift, I'll say. And they, in the document, you'll actually see links to drafts they did. It's a starting point for us. We need to make these work for the district, but the health and medical group did this nicely. Moving on, the mental health group, this was made up of, we had a principal in this group, a school psychologist, and a few school counselors actually. And this group looked at focusing on reconnecting relationships between and among students, faculty, and staff. This really is the foundation for a solid mental health, just being, feeling connected to school, feeling connected to each other is the foundation for being mentally healthy. And this group recognized that. Strategies for supporting all students to reconnect to school. And it's not just mental health, it's also academically figuring out where they are, where there might be gaps. This is really an important part of coming back in. Additionally, not just for all students, but students who might be struggling with coming back to school, and we might consider them in tiers 2 and 3 for purposes of this, having supportive interventions ready that in some cases sit in the counseling office, in some cases that are also, teachers are trained on how to provide those supports to connect students to counselors and to recognize warning signs. And also to leverage community-based referrals such as Interface, which is is available to anybody that lives in the 5 towns, and other referral sources for students who require supplemental supports outside of the school environment. This is something we've had in place, but it's very important at this point to leverage those. Getting into the academics, we had a nice mix of teachers. We had a principal in this group, and we had parents in here as well. And also our students from the high school, who I should mention, our students really were, all the group members in the evaluation said they were a highlight. They really brought so much to the group. Evangeline Welch and Alexis Pratt, I'll mention them. They really did a fantastic job, and they were in this group. This group looked at remote learning, classroom configurations, staffing implications, special education, and professional development. This was the most involved domain for sure. Discussions about high school specific concerns that our student representatives brought to the task force. As we all know, the high school has more students than any other school in our district, and it's obviously where we're focusing a lot of attention on how can we make it safe and make everything work given the pandemic at the high school. For elementary classrooms, one of the recommendations was to remain self-contained to decrease the need for transitions. And again, these are all recommendations too, but it's important to know that the task force, this group of people thought that this was an important one to minimize exposure. And developmental considerations, to always focus on the best ways to intervene with students based on their developmental needs. And this is not a black or white endeavor. This is very, very gray, and all students are different. So, one size fits all is not going to work. As we go back into the fall, we do the best we can to make it work for all students. So I want to jump into the stakeholder survey. And again, for anybody listening, this will be available on our district website, more details on the survey. The survey window was open from June 12th to June 22nd. We had, I think, a very good response. We had 6,250 total respondents, and hopefully you can read the text there. I'll read it briefly. We had 4,347 parent guardians. We had 986 students, 436 teachers from the district, 260 community members, and those would be people who live in one of our 5 towns but do not have students currently in our schools. And non-teaching staff, we had 221. And again, I'm just gonna increase my screen here, and I apologize if that's a little small on your screens. One of the things we looked at was, we asked the question, what conditions do you feel are important to have in place in order to facilitate a return to in-person schooling? And this really was to look at what would they endorse at that time that would be important to go back in school. A few that I want to highlight, because you can see it's broken down by group. Masks for students and masks for staff. You can see those there. Just want to point that out, that when you look at the parent-guardian response, that we had 35% of the respondents endorsed masks for students as being something they would support at that time. Masks for staff, similarly for parents, was about 42%. You can see as you go down that there's more support for masks, but still not much more than 55%. That's going to be something that we're going to, I think as a task force and also as a district, just need to think about ways that, now that we understand that as a requirement from the Department of Ed, ways that we can help garner support for that, if that's going to be something we need to do, and it is. Another question we asked was, which elements do you believe are most essential for students as we respond to guidance from the Massachusetts State Authority? And please select only 3. So this is a forced choice question, and it's a way to find out really what people are prioritizing the most, what is most important to them. I thought the school committee would be interested in this. Face-to-face learning, you can see, was had our highest marks there, our most endorsed, and that's something that we've talked about at these meetings as well, that there really is nothing that can replace face-to-face teaching and learning. That also could be looked at as remote learning if it was face-to-face and virtual, but that teacher contact is something that in the comments was also very important to people. You can look at the other results too in the report. Extracurricular opportunities, you can see, would be, as it's clustered, the lowest rating there. You can see that for students, that was they were the ones that endorsed that the most. Okay. So this is a readiness scale. This is something that comes out of the mental health world. We wanted to apply it just to see where people were in relation to this question. So at this time, how ready are you to support a return to regular school routines, including in-school teaching and learning? So this is broken down by stakeholder group. A few that jump out as outliers, or I would say as the highest rating. If you look at the 5 rating, which would mean very ready to return to school. And again, this was in early mid-June. Parents and guardians and students were endorsing that the most, saying that they were at a 5. Where if you look at, say, the teacher group, which is gray there, is it's a little bit more spread out. You don't see as much of a high endorsement there. Just something to consider. At the task force, we discussed how we expect that this could change quite a bit. If we were to poll people right now, it might look very different because it's so day-to-day, but it's at least a way that we can have a numerical measure of what's on people's minds and how ready they are at this time to go back to in-school teaching and learning. Okay. And just this was what I'll end on. There were some themes in the open responses too, where people could just write in. There was a lot of fear, a lot of qualitative, but when I look through qualitatively, it's a lot about anxiety and fear about going back. And you'll see examples of that in the final report. Remote learning was definitely something that came up quite a bit, and it was both ends of the spectrum and anywhere in between. Remote learning experiences that were very positive, and students and parents saying, I actually prefer this over in school. And then also some that weren't so positive, and students really longing to be back in school. And then wearing masks, as I mentioned too, that was definitely a hot button topic. And a range, some stakeholders saying, whatever it takes, I'll wear a mask, and parents saying it's okay if my child wears a mask, to saying on the other end of things, I absolutely won't send my child in if they have to wear a mask, and that type of thing. So it's good to know what's on people's minds so that we can respond in that way. And again, these recommendations are not the district plan for reopening. They're recommendations from the task force, and I think that's an important distinction. I probably went over my time, but that gives you a little bit of an idea. And again, to say the website will have our task force full report on it. And I'm happy to, if people have questions from the public as well, you can feel free to email me or contact me. I'm happy to, I've been responding to a lot of people's questions and ideas.
Great. Thank you, Brendan. I appreciate that. Again, as we kind of went through this, and Brenda did a great job pulling that entire task force together. It was just so interesting to kind of get all of the different perspectives in terms of where people were coming from, parents, students, medical professionals here in our community. So it was really a well-formed group, and now it's a matter of taking that those recommendations, some of that information, and also information that I'm going to share with you right now that Brendan's going to bring up through his computer, because mine's not working correctly. So he'll walk through this next slideshow, which is again pretty brief, but this is what was shared with or by DESE in terms of the initial fall opening guidance. So Brendan, if you can move to the next slide. So again, DESE has reached out. They have health experts from the medical community. And again, they've spent an awful lot of time working with doctors from Boston, from Mass General in particular. There's a return to school working group, and that's a much larger group. And, there are some superintendents on that group from the MASS group that I'm part of. And there was also collaborations with key stakeholders. And again, that's where working with the teachers union, working with the superintendent's union, and the administrators, parents, experts in the field. So all of that kind of came into play with this. So again, quick table of contents, goals for fall, health and safety requirements, reopening plans, upcoming guidance, and then an appendix. So we can go through these. So again, there was an initial fall memo, and it was really around helping districts achieve safe in-person student learning. So those were really the guiding terms, making sure that we could get kids into school safely. So they're looking for health and safety requirements for in-person learning. All schools will be developing reopening plans. We'll talk a little bit about that. And there's also going to be more DESE guidance. So again, this is just, part of the goals associated with where DESE came from. So it was really the safe return to school for as many students as possible for the in-person setting. We have heard that there is a great deal that is lost when kids aren't able to be in school for the face-to-face piece. So that was a large portion of what DESE was really focusing on. They've looked through the medical literature. We're fortunate that we have such great hospitals and medical professionals in our state. Looking at the third bullet there, it's really around balancing the health and safety risks of COVID-19 with the health and safety and socioeconomic and achievement risks of keeping students out of school. So that was really the balance that they were looking at. And there's really not one mitigation strategy, but a combination of many. So these are some of the different items that they've been talking about, and we've been, sharing with families. So masks and face covering. So, really it's making it so that almost everyone in a school is wearing a mask for the most part. Physical distancing, looking at, and this is a little different. So I think this is where we've had the most conversation at the superintendent's level, and I think maybe at the state level as well. It's the 6 feet versus the 3 feet. So we've been told by CDC 6 feet is really the length or the space in which we should separate from one another. But there's been some research around how the distance associated with, with wearing a mask and, from one seat to another seat, the edge of one seat to another seat, it could be 3 feet. DESE and medical professionals feel as though that could be something that would be safe in a school setting. Hand washing and hand sanitizing, that's something we've been talking about since last end of February, beginning of March, before we even ended our year remote and moved to remote learning. And then staying home when sick, this is going to be one that people are really going to have to pay attention to and focus on, because as we kind of go through this process, we're going to have to talk about, okay, well, how do we define, okay, here's the flu. Well, is it the flu, or is it COVID-19, or is it something else? And we're all just going to have to be extra careful and cautious. And then, so this is the medical literature. And again, this is some of the information that I mentioned a little earlier. Schools do not appear to have played a major role in the COVID-19 transmission. Basically 8 out of 210 involved in school transmission. So it's a small number. COVID-19 infection rates are lower for children than for adults. If exposed, children may be less likely to become infected with COVID-19. And if infected, children may be less likely to infect others with COVID-19. So these are all based on a variety of studies that DESE had access to over the past several months. So as I mentioned earlier, what is going to happen, what the Commissioner of Education has asked all school districts to do is create 3 possible plans associated with a continuum of learning. So it was really 1, in-person learning with new safety requirements. So basically where we were last year at this time, but with the masks and the distancing and everything else that's going along with hand washing and sanitizing, safety, cleanliness. So all of that would be in play as well. A second model is a hybrid model, and that's one that has been discussed and you've probably heard about. And that's a model where you might have half the students in the school for 1 week, and then the following week, half the students come in, in order to space out the classrooms correctly, the lunchrooms, all the different areas where a school could be heavily congested. And the final model is the remote learning model, and that is the model where students are home. It's completely remote. They're learning through a learning platform, and it's something that again they're asking us to plan for as well. So, as I mentioned a little earlier, we will be developing these 3 models and sharing them with DESE by the end of July. And then what will happen is in August, they're actually going to, so this says August, but it's the end of July. The commissioner has asked us to hold off on really creating the plans and defining where and when everything is going to happen until the start of August. I can tell you I was part of a larger conversation today with superintendents from the Assabet Valley Collaborative. And, we were talking about, the concerns that people are hearing from their constituents, for families around daycare, around setting up, what daycare might look like, work schedules and so forth. And we all know, superintendents know this, the earlier we can pull all of this together, the better off we are all going to be. Again, that is still one of the challenges. At the national level, we do have our president saying, I do want everyone back into school. Regardless of what's going on. But at the same time, I think someone mentioned in the comments that were read earlier that we are starting to see a little bit of a bump up in terms of our COVID-19 numbers here in the Commonwealth. And that is evident across the nation right now. in many states. So we're actually seeing, some of the highest numbers of COVID infection during this entire time. And then let's see. And again, this just kind of goes into how DESE is planning on working through this and helping districts out and so forth. And as you can see, all those items around comprehensive guidance coming in July, it's probably going to be a little more, hopefully a little more defined. But what are the prerequisites for reopening for school? What are remote learning resources? DESE is developing some resources and some connections with some companies in which districts will be able to buy into some of these learning systems, special programs and populations, athletics, extracurriculars, and electives. Transportation, that's a big one for us because, again, one of the things they talk about in terms of how some districts are trying to think about doing this is to have split schedules or to have staggered schedules. Staggered schedules for a district our size with 49 buses is very, very challenging, would be very challenging. Also, facilities and operations, how they're going to kind of assist us in terms of what we're looking at. Process for handling a COVID-19 positive case in the school community. And then key policies, including academic calendar and consideration. So I can tell you that there's talk of the commissioner looking at a lower number of days that students actually have to be in school so that there would be the opportunity for teachers and administrators to be in the school 3 to 5 days before school actually starts in order to ensure that all of the safety precautions and measures are put into place. That is a discussion that's actively occurring, and I'm participating in the MASS conference over the next 2 days remotely. And one of the discussion points will be, looking at how we can safely do this in a manner that's consistent, or as consistent as we can be throughout the Commonwealth. So that's that part of it. Thank you very much, Brendan. In terms of what we're looking at, again, moving forward, I did want to just thank Brendan and the task force for pulling that information together. We are looking at the development of the plan. We will have that together. We're also going to be sending out a survey to parents and staff this week in reference to technology and access to technology, because there's a $25 million tech grant that is due next week that we are going to probably put in for, as well as there's another amount of money associated with the state. It's a little over $200 million that's going to be made available to all districts, and it comes out to be about $220 a student, which would give us more funds for PPE, more funds for maybe some more tech support and those types of things, in order to ensure that we're able to kind of deal with a continuum associated with in-person, remote, or a hybrid model. And what I can tell you is that they've asked us to attempt to be as flexible as possible in terms of looking at how we can, if we're in school, maybe we get the kids in school, and then 8 weeks into it, we've got to move to a different model. So this is something that we're all attempting to work through right now. And I think once we know, okay, this is what we're doing that first day of school, and this is the model that we're going to be using, that will assist, I think, everybody kind of just, thinking about, okay, this is what it's going to look like. This is how we're going to talk to our kids about this. It's going to be a challenge. And, I can tell you, there probably aren't a lot of people that want to be in a superintendent seat right now, because, there aren't a lot of answers. And that's what we're looking to do. We're trying to define what we need to do.
Thank you so much, Dr. McCall. Are there any other aspects of your report you'd like to highlight before I move to the committee?
I think we're in a pretty good place right now. I appreciate the time that everybody's given me with this.
Thank you. All right. So for today's roundtable, so on your agenda, there are 2 major bullet points. So the first is this reopening task force and next steps. and you just got 2 presentations on that. So on our first time around the virtual table, I'm going to ask you to have your comments focused on that topic. We're then going to move to any updates on tiered reductions. And then after that, if you have a pertinent topic you would like to discuss, we'll move on to the third kind of parking lot issues if we still have time, because all items on the agenda really do need to be covered tonight. All right. And so for tonight's meeting, I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to try to mix this up every meeting. Laura's already smiling at me because I think she knows she's in the middle. So we're going to start in the middle, go down, and then back up. So members have an opportunity to speak first. So Member Kirschenbaum, your comments?
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the work that's been done on the task force. I'm thankful for the committee's work on this plan. It appears to address many aspects of the school day operations, and I would like to see greater detail in many aspects of the plan. I'd like to see more detail on the one-to-one device start to the school year in the learning plans. I think that that's going to be a major critical piece to being able to be fluid among these 3 plans. I'd also like to see teachers utilize the online learning platforms like the Google Classroom and so forth in a consistent manner so that we can build in flexibility to our year to transition in and out of the 3 learning plans. I really feel that we'll probably be, in most cases, needing to be very fluid through these plans, depending on the conditions of the outbreaks and so forth. I'd like to see a school calendar plan to maximize flexibility in the school year. It was just briefly noted in the plan, and I think that I'd like to see more detail about how we could be responsible to potential COVID outbreak threats. And I'd like to see a curriculum plan that optimizes low COVID outbreak days. So that's sort of my term to say, hey, when things are going well, we want to make sure that we cover as efficiently as possible those in the most essential curriculum materials, essentially sort of front loading those materials and then spiraling back to content later in the year. So really trying to get the kids up and running when things are going well, so that if we do need to pull back and move out into a hybrid model or a remote model, that the kids can feel, we can feel confident that they've at least gotten some of the most critical pieces of the curriculum for that age group. I think program agility must be the focus of this year so that teaching and learning transitions across the 3 learning plans can be efficient and effective. I liked that in the plan we saw a focus on face-to-face learning, and I think that even if it's remote, it can be synchronous learning, and I think that provides a more robust learning plan. So, I think that making sure that we can move through those 3 phases, those 3 learning plans, is going to be the best way that we can make it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for keeping to your 2 minutes.
I tried.
1 down, 20-something to go. All right, Member Lavoie.
Well, I'm as excited as Member Kirschenbaum was to be called on, as the middle of the alphabet never gets picked first. A couple of things just to build upon, I think, what Member Kirschenbaum mentioned. Access to technology. So I definitely want to see more of that, but also what the plan is to make sure that our learners can use that technology to access a curriculum if they need to. So when Member Weeks talked initially about thinking of all of our learners, thinking about that it's not just a one-to-one device, it's how do we equip our learners to do that, and how do we equip teachers to help motivate those students that could require that face-to-face, and what are the options for that? I also would be very concerned with whatever approach it is on how we define services to our most needy kids. Certainly, that is going to have an impact on a plan going forward. So what does that look like? And to the point on school calendar, I truly think that, when you look at the survey results, parents really and other stakeholders were very much concerned on the face-to-face interactions, the social interactions. Both of those were very high up. So when you think about the weather, we're all used to having summers off. And I'm not saying to put full school curriculum, but there has to be consideration for the beautiful weather that we have in the summer. Could that be an opportunity to think, if something does happen, could you have outdoor classes? Could you have better interactions that could promote some of that social distancing? Not to say that you don't need the confines of a building and all of that, but we're in a time that even if a vaccine were to come, you're looking at perhaps a 75% vaccination success rate. And best case scenario, they're saying 66% of people would get a vaccination. So as a math person, with a 75% rate of success and only 66% of people getting it, your vaccine's only 50% effective to begin with those numbers. So we have to think about ways of doing education in a safe manner that meets everybody, irregardless of the idea of a vaccine coming, because none of us can predict that future. What we can do is take the hand that's dealt to us and figure out the safest way to educate our students, but also keep our teachers safe. So that's the point that I think is critical here, is that understanding that what is important for teachers to feel safe. And I think that it's really important to have that, because without that, the foundation kind of cracks right there, and a good learning experience is not going to happen. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Member Lavoie. You were also right on time. I'm liking my odds tonight. Member Longbelio.
So I want to echo what Member Kirschenbaum said about the importance of face-to-face learning, regardless of whether that's in person or online. I think it's absolutely key. And also what she had to say about program agility. We may have to switch modalities very quickly depending on any number of circumstances that might arise. So I think that's very important. And it's very, very difficult to pull off, I think. But I think we need to put as much effort as we can into being as agile as possible. One thing that I think might be helpful is if we could seek some funding for teacher professional development over the summer to ensure that teachers, to the extent possible, can hit the ground running in the fall with whatever degree of remote learning might be needed at that time. And then I'm wondering, what is the current thinking about how we respond if a child is diagnosed positive? Do we quarantine that child for 14 days? Do we quarantine other students in the class, in the grade, in the school? These are all really tough questions that I think it would be helpful to have the beginnings of some answers about how we will approach that, because it certainly is a distinct possibility. So those are my thoughts and questions.
Dr. McCall, I thought you said DESE will be having forthcoming guidance on what to do if there is a case in the building.
Yes, they will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Longbelio. Member Mitchell? You with us tonight, Rebecca? I don't believe so.
Megan, no Ben,
Yep.
no Mike Dennis, no Bob Imber,
Okay,
and no Ken.
gotcha. All right. Member Otmar then.
All right, thank you. So the thing that I'll just want to key in on from the report was, in looking at the survey results, actually one of the things that wasn't mentioned, and that was kind of the first block in regards to percentages of respondents that felt a vaccine would be important. And so to refresh everyone's memory, it was 36% for parents, 48% for students, which I thought was interesting. And then teachers, non-teaching staff were around 50%. Certainly, I think one of the things that would behoove us would be to survey or kind of follow up with our parents, guardian, and say, we're looking at looking at our guidance for our opening, there's going to be either some version of in-person hybrid mix, and then there's an option for remote learning only. And so using these numbers, we can probably have a starting estimate of 30%, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower, but that we definitely will need that information, I think, to refine our plans. Because even if we're looking at 30%, that's 190 students per grade for every grade. And so on one hand, that's a big chunk, and so you could figure something out for like how many virtual classrooms that look like. And so as I said last meeting, for my family and for our risk, our daughters will be doing remote learning until there's a vaccine. And so if that means they're in a remote classroom that has some students from Princeton, some students from Rutland, from Holden, because that's kind of the way it works out, hey, great, they're still getting a good WRSD education. We're good with that. But we got to figure out kind of what those numbers are going to look like for us. And then that also helps us for the folks in the building doing hybrid, because if it's 30% that are going to be at home, then that's only 70% we've got in the building. And that makes a little more workable than if we've got 100% in the building. But I think that's some information that we're going to need to help with our planning. We've got some numbers that can kind of give us a starting point to at least get some ballpark information, but hopefully we'll be able to get to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Otmar. Member Shapiro?
Hi, yes. I just had a couple comments. First of all, I appreciate the comments made so far, calling out the needs of the special needs students and how they need to be looked at and not grouped in with all of the other students. The other thing too that I was concerned about when I read the report with the task force is that it seemed that they were grouping all students together as if they were the same when we look at the elementary, middle, and high school students. Rather than saying, these are the needs of the elementary school population, these are the needs of the middle school, and these are the needs of the high school. And what I'm thinking about mostly, and when I was responding as a parent to that survey, was like, are you asking about, is this realistic for my incoming kindergartner, or are you asking, is this realistic for my high school student? So I had a hard time even answering those questions because the answer was like, no, yes, no, it's like depending. So I'd like to see them kind of consider and drill down a little bit more and to consider that, you know, the reality of online learning for a high school student is probably a lot more real than the reality of a elementary school student. And then the middle school students somewhere in between. Some classes online would work, some classes might not. Is that a bell telling me to stop, Megan?
No, but that would be super clever if I can figure that out for next time.
Okay, I just was wondering, like it rang twice, and I'm like, I don't feel like that was 2 minutes. Okay, so those are my comments about, you know, considering that not all students in our district across, you know, all of our schools, elementary, middle, and high school should be lumped together as in the same, because they're going to be different needs. So thank you.
Thank you, and no bell, no bell.
No bell, no.
No cowbell tonight. Thank you. Member Silva?
Yeah, thank you. I think the task force actually did a great job of outlining a lot of the concerns that I myself had. But in terms of my comments, I want to thank Member Kirschenbaum for really outlining some of the same questions I had, and she did a great job. And same concern I had that Member Lavoie pointed out is the numbers when it comes to vaccine versus, you know, the risk to students and parents coming back into school. And lastly, I mentioned in this last meeting, but Member Ottmeyer also brought it up again, there are going to be a lot of families that will still opt for 100% remote learning. And so I know we talked about, you know, that DESE's going to, you know, recommend one of those three options, but I believe that, you know, giving the parents a say in which option they prefer that works for their family is definitely key moving forward.
Thank you so much, Member Silva. Member Smith?
Okay, thank you. I'm very concerned with any return to the physical school building. And I think, as Dr. McCall mentioned, getting students to school will be a monumental task. I'm also leery of putting our students, faculty, and staff in danger with so little known about this virus. I'm concerned about a return to in-school learning. Remote learning and augmenting the stakes with it and expectation seems like a better use of our time. In my own life, I've been thinking a lot about this. As many as you know, I'm a teacher at Algonquin and at high school. And I started mapping out just what the day might be like for students arriving to school at 7 o'clock on the bus and then getting to homeroom, and what that might look like, and then what happens in the classroom setting. And it just reminded me of all of the variables that happen, all of the things, the events that happen in just that 1 hour of time. And there are so many things that will be so unaccounted for in any plan that is developed. For example, what happens when a student needs to use the restroom and they're sitting in the first period class? What happens when a student sneezes? That seems silly, but the mask becomes soiled. What happens when the teacher sneezes and needs to change the mask and then needs to wash hands, but can't because the water is access to water is halfway down the hallway and he or she cannot leave the class unattended? What about the overwhelming smell of sanitizer from the 10 to 15 kids or however many kids in the classroom? What does that do? What about the 90-degree heat in classrooms where air quality is already questionable? So many questions. Let's see, got off a little bit here. So there are a lot of things to think about. I know that many people want their students back in school. My kids want me back in school and want to be back in school, and in fact are insisting that we get back. They want it, but just because there's a desire doesn't mean that risking the health, safety, and well-being of our students, staff, and faculty is worth it. Frankly, I am fearful of of having death in our community due to a decision to open schools. Even the loss of one child, one staff member, one faculty member, because of a decision that we may make, something that we overlook, that's a lot to bear. And that is really what my worry is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Smith. Member Williamson?
Thank you. I wanted to comment. Member Smith captured quite a bit of what I was going to mention. We have to create these 3 plans and send them to the state, and one will be a hybrid model. And I think when we put that model together and we're thinking about the schedule, I would love to see some teachers and administrators have the opportunity to do a time on learning analysis, kind of from when the kids walk into the building, social distancing and all the things that we have to do to keep them safe. How long is that process going to take? And then once they're in the classroom, considering those things like hand washing and, getting up to use the restroom and all of those things, how much time is going to be spent trying to keep our kids and our staff safe versus how much time is going to be spent actually learning? And is it worth the risk? And I think, the teachers and administrators are going to have, they know what this is going to look like when the rubber meets the road. And I think that's going to help to make the decision about whether or not we feel like it is, it's worth the time on learning to actually put people back into the buildings. I also, there's a great responsibility that I feel for keeping the kids and the staff and the community healthy. And that's, in our hands. And, that's just my one thought is having some analysis done by the people in the buildings, just to give us that sense of how much learning will happen if we're there in a hybrid model with all of these restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Woodland?
Hi. A lot of what I had to say, Member Smith already said, so I should be brief. And Member Williamson, I agree. That is exactly where my thinking is for what is the point in a way of going through looking at how we can be most agile. If we're realistic, if we look at where we are budget wise, planning wise, with 7 weeks out, it seems like we're squandering any time thinking about in-person hybrids when realistically, looking at the rate of transmission, looking at how quickly it gets out into the community, and we don't know what to expect, and we don't know truly the children spreading, the risk of how much children spread the disease. We don't, I know that those studies were listed, but they are plagued with small sample size or this kind of problem or this kind of consideration. Our kids haven't been in school for us to know how we do school and how it transmits the virus. So I don't really like putting that much stock in that kind of a study. It doesn't seem like it's giving us good information. But when we're looking at where we are, the other point that I wanted to make was about professional development and the timeline to begin it, because we only have these few weeks left. And so whether it is professional development for working on remote or like the suggestion of teachers developing plans to, within their lesson plans, to encourage physical distancing, is that something that is known how to do now? I mean, I feel like that's so far out of left field of what our teachers generally want to do. I'm thinking of the elementary school level. You know, there's just a lot of these detailed things that would be off the table with remote, and we wouldn't have that burden of what if our decision led to community spread. The other point I want to make very quickly is about the survey, just in terms of, you know, it is from about a month ago, and this moves quickly and changes quickly. So I think that there are a lot of opinions that probably have since changed. And the other part was for that last question about regular school routines, how the readiness scale. If we highlight the teachers' readiness and the staff readiness, they are both in the 3. It's the parents who had a much larger response rate who are pushing that 5 response. And I think that it's a disproportionate number of people who answered the survey, with 4,000 some parents and 400 some teachers. But the burden is going to be on the teachers. And so I think that we would do well to remember that it's a disproportionate low response, but it's a disproportionately high level of burden. And that's really just what I wanted to express and hope we can think about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Member Young?
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, as a member of the task force, I know that, you know, all the effort that went into the recommendations, you know, it was a lot of work with people from all over, and it's still a plan that only covers some very general recommendations. You know, we definitely need to support the superintendent now as he works with the staff to develop the actual implementation, because it's going to be difficult. And there's a lot of very, very minute details that need to be addressed. And it's also things that we do need to see moving forward, you know, that we want to see as a committee and, you know, parents want to see. You know, I've been seeing around a lot that, you know, there's parents that they wanted to see the plan 2 weeks ago, you know, and what it is for the upcoming year. You know, they're seeing tonight what the general recommendations are for that plan. And, you know, that's where we are. That's as far as we can be. And it's very good at this point. But, you know, everybody needs to understand that any plan for opening day that we make could change on day 2. I mean, it could change, you know, on very short notice due to someone coughing in a classroom, showing symptoms, someone, you know, just general statistics in communities around us and not necessarily our community. You know, so the district doesn't just need to develop the plans for all three scenarios. Like every parent, every family, and these are the people I'm speaking to right now. You need to develop the plans for all three situations. Don't wait until it's too late. Develop the plans now and be ready for it, because there's a very real chance we'll see every single one of these plans implemented this fall. We want to get people in the building. We may not be able to. It's not something we can just offload to school administration and run with it. As for some of the things we talked about tonight, in general, personally, I'm hesitant to recommend that the district do their best to appease people that want their kids in the building and people that don't want their kid in the building under any circumstance. But this is the scenario we're in. We need to address it. People aren't making these decisions on just willy-nilly. Like there's very real situations where students can't go to school no matter what this year. I have a niece that has recovered from leukemia. She's lost portions of her lungs. She can't go to school. She can't risk the attendance in school, which means her sister can't risk the attendance in school. It's very real. It's scary for those families that need to work with this. And it just shows how much we need to really get people started on that remote learning plan. What I saw in the spring, even at the end of the spring, it wasn't remote learning. It was remote recommendations on things to look up.
Right.
I talking to some people, they had different experiences than me. Some of the teachers did really, really well. But I know of at least one teacher that my daughter had. He had one meeting over the entire time with the kids, one online meeting, and it was like, hey, how's it going? Okay, yep, there's only one thing that's due, and it's due the last day. Over the whole time. Like, it was like little recommendations, but nothing was due. Like, it was so, and there were other teachers that did really well, but it needs to be consistent. It needs to be consistent across grades. It needs to be consistent across towns, and we need to get focused on it, because no matter what, I think we're looking at remote learning too.
Thank you, Member Young. I let you go a minute over.
Oh, thanks. Sorry. I thought I'd be under, and then I just started typing out what I wanted to say.
Thank you, though. Your comments were very well received. Member Amos?
Hi. So I think, most things have been said. I just wanted to mention that I've been thinking a lot lately about solutions that we're planning to use in higher ed for the potential scenario of having some kids in the building while some kids are remote, which is, from a teaching perspective, just very complicated and a nightmare. So one of the things we're going to be doing is using tech to stream on Zoom while teaching our classes, so that students are getting the same explanations of academic content without teachers doubling their work by having an in-class class and then doing explanation videos. So I don't know if that's something to think about. If anyone wants more details on like how I know at my school how we're doing that and how we're getting it set up. And if I know earlier there was mention of the tech grant. So if there's any sort of possibility, I just wanted to throw that out there, because it's going to be a nightmare for teachers if they have some kids in the classroom, some at home, have to get the same content to everyone. So I just wanted to throw out that one idea. That's one way to do it.
And if I can just jump in on that, my wife's a professor at Worcester State, as you know, and one of the things that we spoke about today was the fact that they're actually moving to that model with half the kids at home, half the kids in the classroom, and then flipping over. But having the hover cams in order to show what's on the screen, show some video. That's something that we talked about in our superintendent group also a little earlier today. So definitely on to, that's a good idea. We just have to see how it might play out.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Member Amos. Member Ayala, welcome back.
Hi, thanks. It's good to be back. I didn't know I would be until last minute. So I agree with mostly whatever, well, I do agree with everything everybody said so far. My comments are after reading the CDC and DESE statistics on transmission rate for children was kind of alarming because our kids are asymptomatic and we don't have enough data. What Member Woodland was kind of saying, we definitely don't have enough data because kids were taken out of the scenario so early on. I think that's why statistics aren't showing exactly what's happening with kids. And if kids are asymptomatic, you don't know, and they're gonna give it to their teacher, their parent, their grandparent, whoever might have might be at risk. So I definitely question about kids being able to go back into the building. It's scary, the thought of that. I do agree with Carl with getting more numbers on how many parents would want to do remote learning versus the ones that say definitely keeping my child home due to low immune system, whatever it may be. I think getting those numbers and then getting numbers on how many parents are able to transport their kids to and from school or caregivers. Or is there grandparents that can transport kids and not put them on the bus to get less kids in transportation? Maybe this was all said, I'm not sure, wasn't at last meeting, but those are my thoughts about that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Member Bennett?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Loud and clear.
All right, so not a lot to add. I think everyone is incredibly thoughtful here. Everyone's put a lot into this, and I know that the task force is working super hard. Oh man, it's such a huge task. So I just have like a couple of thoughts in there, and maybe it's been addressed previously, but limiting the amount of like vectors for contamination when you have a school open, if you were to do a hybrid, which is in my opinion, a super scary thing to do. But if there was going to be an opening of schools, limiting the vectors by maybe making sure that the kids, because that's the biggest group of contaminators who are running around the school, make sure that they stay, like contained in one spot for the most part, and then maybe moving the teachers around instead would limit the amount of exposure. And then, of course, with communication, everyone having a walkie-talkie. I'm sure that everybody's, thought of these things. And then online learning, I think, that should definitely be the focus. And then maybe because it is going to be a little bit of a struggle for most people to get that done, and a lot of kids can't necessarily work online as well as others, maybe allowing the school year to be as long as it needs to be for the kids to get that work done. Maybe kind of like instead of the limiting it to this extended amount of time, allowing it to be when they get that done, they advance a little bit more fluid for that. And that just would allow for the kids to actually get the work done that they need to get done, and without the immense pressure of the online situation. And then when it comes to the graphs that we went through, just finding out the reason why behind the need is important to me, because when the parents are saying, oh yes, we're ready to put our kids back in school, from what I read of that, and all of the explanations on, like social media and talking with parents myself, it's because it's very hard to have the kids home. But it's not necessarily for the best situation health-wise for the community. So having a reason behind why they're saying those things, I think, might be important. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Those are great points. Thank you so much. Member Brown?
Hi. I also want to thank the administration and task force for putting that report together. It's a lot of work. And I believe number one priority as the school committee is the safety of students and our employees. The past few weeks, I've been bargaining with the teachers union and the paraprofessionals. And when you're on Google Hangout with them, and we're talking MOAs and things like that, it always bubbles up in their concern. And I really hear their concern about going back into the building. And so our number one priority is the safety. And we all want the kids to go back into the building. I agree. I have a special needs kid up at the high school that has very little engagement since we shut down the schools. And so I believe that we do need to plan. We need to plan, and plan, especially if we are going to be doing remote learning, because some of our buildings did remote learning pretty well. A lot of them didn't, and we were not prepared for remote learning. And so I think we have this time to make plans going ahead as a worst case scenario that we do have to have remote learning. And so I just really don't want to see what we did back in March and April and May. It didn't work for a lot of students. It did work for some, but it didn't work for especially the special needs students. It's very hard to engage over a tablet. And so we really need to plan accordingly, especially if it's going to be remote. So, and also the consistency in our district. I've spoken to many parents. Some parents had a good experience. A lot of them didn't. And it tends to go from building to building is what I'm finding. So the consistency of the remote learning really needs to be looked at. That's all I have.
Member Gustafson? Malaya, are you there?
Okay, can you hear me? I had to find my microphone. Okay, hope this works this week. So a lot of my concerns have been mentioned by other people about being in person. The things that I did want to mention, I am very curious to hear the administration's timeline for decision making. I know that DESE has laid out a requirement of the end of July, and also this other recommendation that they urge us not to share any information for a week. However, when they closed schools initially, they also didn't want to close schools, and the superintendents did what they thought was best anyways. So I am very curious about the timeline, because we have things that depend on whether we're remote or hybrid. For example, the teachers deciding whether they're going to retire. I believe their deadline is in July. And, that might be a major factor for some of them. So to not tell them that information, I think is not necessarily a wise decision. So, and whereas it's a recommendation by DESE, I'd be curious to hear how that gets sorted out in time. I'm concerned about that. I also have a question about the remote learning. A lot of our emphasis is on PPE and how we get into the building safely, But really, 2 of the 3 options involve some element of remote learning. And I would like to know what the district has done and is doing to enhance remote learning since the spring. We did the survey. We never saw the results of the building survey. We never saw the results of the teacher survey. So we don't know what they think and what elements you've taken from that and what work has been done since then to work on really looking at how we did remote learning, how we can improve it, because we're saying that we need to have a robust remote learning process, and we need to do better than the spring, which we do, because it will actually be teaching and learning, not an emergency situation. So the expectations are higher. But I know there's been a lot going on, but I'm curious what the curriculum groups have done and what the plan is for taking what we learned in the spring and building on it, and or just starting over and building a new plan, because I don't think we've put enough time into that. I haven't seen any evidence of us putting any time into that. So I'm very concerned about that. There's also a time issue in that our teachers, if we do want to do professional development, or even very simple things like how do you consistently use Google Classroom? I mean, half of them use Google Forms, and then there's no feedback to the families or students once you submit that. You don't see comments, you don't even see the questions once you send it in. So there's some very basic things that we need to do better to be more consistent, all the way up to how you develop and teach, things to students who will never set foot in the school. And with our teachers on essentially break until 2 days before school starts, I'm kind of concerned about how we plan to do that. If we've talked with the unions about professional development this summer in this unique situation, or, those are my concerns in those areas.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. Dr. McCall, do you want to respond to any of her questions?
Yeah, again, those are good questions, Malaya. In reference to remote learning. And again, you have to remember, we started off with not necessarily remote learning, but it was more exposure. So once we transitioned over to the learning part, that was a challenge. I think that was and all of that was something that we attempted to do. And I think certain people, as I think Member Brown mentioned, certain teachers, certain schools had it down, and they were able to do it a little more fluidly than others. So what we're looking at is really talking about how we can move forward with a remote learning plan. That's a remote learning plan. And that's a conversation that we're having as superintendents throughout Massachusetts right now, because again, everyone was put into the same situation at the same time. I think Member Lavoie mentioned technology, the access to technology, the importance of that. And that can't be understated as we move forward with what we're doing. We also have to look at, again, how I think someone else mentioned the amount of time that, if we're online, if it's a hybrid, or if it's in person, in any model, the time on learning time is going to look different. We're not going to have our 900 plus hours. It's going to be shorter because of the amount of time it'll take to wash hands, to change PPE, to move from one space to another, staggered entries into schools. Principal Biendo and I have talked on several occasions just about, even if we're at 1,000 kids coming into a building, which is what would happen if the high school had a half on, half off. That's 1,000 kids pretty much coming into the building all at the same time. Well, how do we get are they going directly to their classrooms? Do they use lockers? Because the lockers are on top of one another. There's no way that you can get 6-foot spacing or even 3-foot spacing, at the high school in that sense. So those are all things that we're also taking into consideration. So yes, Malaya, we are working on all of those things. Those also go along with the plans that we have. Super important focusing on the remote learning. I do agree that is something that we need to focus on. At the same time, we also have to be able to say, what might it look like if all of our kids are back in school, at the beginning of the school year?
Thank you so much for your response. Member Haber?
Hi. I pretty much agree with what everybody said. I do think that, so much of this rides on what DESE's final guidelines are, that, hopefully we're focusing on the things that we have control over, that we can handle, that we can work on until that point. And it's clear to me that, we have a great handle on how we deal with kids in school, and the task force is working on the procedure part of that. I'd really like to see us working more on the actual curriculum for remote learning, and especially the training for the teachers, everything from methods to a curriculum, and especially in the lower grades. I think that the high schoolers, you can set them up with their Chromebooks and let them be fairly independent. But how do you teach a kindergartner to read and pronounce words properly over a computer? It just seems so much more difficult. And it also seems to me that those teachers are the ones who really, really need training before we open. And I don't know if that means that we start later so that the teachers have time to go in and get that training ahead of time. But I hope that we do have flexibility in that calendar for that, as well as for taking time for closures if need be, and making the most of the times that we can have windows open in classrooms, and taking into consideration, snow days in January and February that we would be closed anyway, are a better time to be home if need be. So again, flexibility, I think, is key.
Thank you so much. Last but not least, Member Haynes.
Hello. Thank you to the task force. A lot of great work. Thank you so much. I agree. I agree with everything. Good night. Great job, everybody. I appreciate all the comments. I would have to emphasize, yes, remote learning is almost certainly going to be part of our lives next year. So I too, like everybody, I look forward to the specifics on how that's going to be improved over what we had in the spring, which is absolutely critical. I think everybody agrees. Yes, there were some teachers, and I could name them, who were absolutely awesome and could provide a clinic on how to do it. And then there were others who weren't. So consistency and improving would be, that'd be great. I really like the talk about the early emphasis on PD days for the teachers, not just curriculum, but how to use the tools to present this to kids. I think that's important. And there was a discussion, this was probably a few weeks ago, about the possibility of looking at the calendar. And I realize this would involve having to talk to the union. I understand that, but it might be worth doing, where we look at the calendar and actually front load the calendar with some of the PD days instead of scattering them throughout the year, maybe to take advantage of getting some of this training early. I know there was a discussion about having a few days right at the beginning of school, but I know there are PD days that are scattered throughout the calendar, and maybe there's a way to kind of move some of those up to the front of the year to help with some of these issues, because they are going to be very important. It's almost certainly going to be part of what we're doing this coming year. As far as reopening goes, I wonder if a phased approach might be similar, somewhat like what the state's been doing. I wonder if that might be something to consider. I feel like if we open the door at the end of August and all the kids come back and it's full capacity and we're going with the absolute minimum requirements of 3-foot distancing, I feel like that's basically just a race to remote learning in the first couple of weeks. I wonder if it wouldn't be wiser to at least, if we're gonna bring kids back, and if we decide we're gonna bring them back, I'm wondering if it isn't wiser to at least try to do it on a gradual basis to see what's working, if it's working, before we just race and try it. That's just a thought. And the last crazy idea I had, and I promise this is it, I promise. If we do alternate days, is it possible to do the busing in such a way where we get the kids from like this neighborhood on this day and that neighborhood on the next day? And the reason for that is so that mom and dad, if they have kids in multiple grades, they know that this week that my kid's in school, and they know that next week both of my kids are home. And it's just, from a parent's perspective, that's going to be easier to plan and manage if all my kids are at school this week and all my kids are at home next week, rather than trying to juggle, well, Johnny's home this week and Susie's home next week. It just seems like if we are looking at mixing up or alternating days for kids, that might be a better way to help parents. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to circle back. Member Kirschenbaum had her hand raised.
Thank you. In an effort to maintain my 2-minute timeline in the beginning, I missed a couple of key points that I feel if I didn't address now, I would miss an opportunity to, and I didn't hear these echoed in our comments. One is on a question about, do we know, since each district is really up on its own to decide what phase we're entering into, whether it's remote or hybrid or in person, do we know what the impact is to teachers in the district who have families in other districts? That is a major obstacle for some teaching families who may have to balance childcare for their kids who are not going to school.
Dr. McCall, do you want to address that? Because I think Desi's telling us what mode we have to go into.
Yeah, they are, and I think this is Laura, I hear what you're saying with that. That's something that I think would, if a district next to another district that has a lot of teachers that live in that community and work in another district, I think that's one of the ways that might be able to work out. I guess we're a little more fortunate in our community in the sense that we have a lot of teachers who live within our 5 towns. So, it's not quite as maybe challenging as as maybe a place like Shrewsbury, where you have a lot of people who live in surrounding communities who drive into Shrewsbury. So how might that affect what happens with those parents or, teachers and parents at home when their kids might have to be home or they have to be in school? And but again, that's a really challenging thing to do.
I agree. I hear you on that. I have one more quick question, thought actually that came up. Member Haber and actually Member Haynes reminded me of this idea, which is to look at particular groups who are in need of in-person services, sort of prioritizing those groups and actually separating groups, not necessarily by the age, but by their reading acquisition. So sort of partition kids off from learning to read and reading to learn. And that students who are needing direct instruction on how to read should probably be prioritized to getting back into school. That might be younger kids, but it also might be kids with IEPs and so forth. And in small groups, they might be able to make strides academically that they wouldn't otherwise. So those are my only 2 points that I wanted to make sure I addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I think our student rep, Catherine, you had a question?
Can I just say something really quickly? I'll be really brief.
Yeah, go ahead. Of course.
I want to echo what a lot of you guys have been saying from like a student's perspective, because I think a lot of us want to go back to school from what I can tell, and this has probably already been addressed, but like a lot of us, especially me, like I'm a senior, I know a lot of my friends are eager to like get back to normal life in the fall, but like I think someone else said this, but just because there's a desire doesn't mean there's a need. And I think that's absolutely the case here, and that we need to do what's best, because if it means that my favorite teacher isn't in the hospital with COVID or whatever, then it's worth me staying home and missing out on a few activities for my friend's mom to not be sick or whatever else. And I think just we need to do like what's right. And a lot of those student surveys are definitely biased based off what we want, and what we want isn't necessarily exactly what we need. But I do think if we go back to remote learning, it needs to be addressed, because a lot of what I was doing was busy work or not helpful at all, and it was just frustrating and a lot of a waste of time. And I think just like one thing is, this is a really evolving situation, so maybe if we did like weekly surveys or just like quick questions of like overall to see how the situation's changing, and maybe weekly is too much. And the other thing I was wondering is, could we do some sort of simulation of different models, like bring 30 students into the school and try to figure that out, if like over the summer, to see which things would work and which ways didn't work, and try to like fix some of the like nooks and crannies out.
Thank you, Catherine. Dr. McCall, any response to that final part? And then Member Smith had a question. I do want to leave a little time for a quick discussion before 9 o'clock on tiered reductions as well.
Sure. So, Catherine, yeah, that's interesting idea, bringing kids back in. We have been looking at classrooms, moving desks around. We have the square footage for all the classrooms. So, DESE recommends taking everything out of the classroom with the exception of maybe a teacher's desk and the desks in order to fit that 3-foot model. That's hard to do, especially up at the high school. The high schools has small classrooms. So we're looking at that very closely. Most of the elementary schools, I think we're going to be pretty good, in that sense. But it would require us to look at the tables that we use versus the desks and how that might play out. And DESE's actually, coming up with some guidance around tables versus desks. So.
Thank you, Catherine and Dr. McCall. Member Smith, I'll leave you with the last question before we move on to the next thing.
Thank you. It's more of a comment. I think it's in relation to what Member Kirschenbaum asked about the exact plan that we might use. And from my understanding, while the commissioner can recommend a particular model or mode, that it's up to school committees and local communities. So school committees making that decision with obviously consultation with the district leadership and all the other pieces that fall into place. But obviously the exception to that is if the governor, not the commissioner, but if the governor decided to close the schools again, the school buildings. So that's something to keep in mind, that this is in our control and that we are not at the, at DESE's beck and call for how we do this. And while there is guidance from DESE, our district, we get to decide those parameters for opening and not DESE. So we got to keep that in mind, I think, as we move forward and make these decisions. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Second, on the discussion of the report, there was actually some positive news in the superintendent's report regarding tiered reductions. I'm assuming we might have fewer comments on this as we did with the reopening task force, but I did want to open this portion of the report to any comments and questions. Perhaps if we can go just with hand raised if you had a comment or question on this section of the report. Member LaVoy, we'll start with you. You're first hand in the room.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I just have a quick comment for reductions. I think there was a lot of there was some action taken by community members to start a petition through change.org, specifically talking about cuts to athletics, middle school athletics, the arts, and those types of things. And what I saw was an outstanding reach out by members of the community. I saw members of the community offering to sponsor middle school athletic teams. I saw members of the community offering to coach and volunteer. I saw members of the community offering transportation for kids to games. I saw a lot of creative ideas in terms of having centralized meets on a weekend day. And I would just stress to admin that there is an overwhelming opportunity here to engage with the community and think about perhaps, and this is not to take away stipends from any teachers, but if there's a difference between taking away a stipend for a teacher assisting in coaching athletics or having a volunteer from the community and using that money to help provide a teacher in the classroom, I think it's paramount to make those decisions. So I would also tell you, I saw information from students who said that's what they're looking forward to. Kids going into 8th grade in their last year of middle school saying, you know what, I'm looking at baseball in the spring, and how can we think about cutting something that's over almost a year away? And that's what I'm looking forward to as a motivating factor. So I'm not saying that sports are more paramount, but what I saw was there's an overwhelming opportunity to engage and think outside of the box from how we would traditionally approach these programs.
Thank you so much. Member Otmar, you're next in my chat box.
Thank you. My question's pertaining to kind of the numbers that are shown in this in regards to how much to reduce and the tiers associated with it. I'm curious as to why we kind of stuck with this 1/12 reduction goal of like almost 4.3 million. Whereas before, when we had our full 5 tiers, we had 1/12, which was our starting point, and then we had another 6 million on top of that, which was potential reductions in state aid. With the passing of the 4 towns and passing the budget, it would seem that would close off that 4 million, which was the 1/12, but we could still end up being short 6 million, which was kind of the number that we've always been looking at with our worst case scenario with a reduction in state aid. And so I think that if that was our original worst case scenario for state aid, and we don't know anything about state aid yet, we probably should have at least held on to that artifact. And looking at this, that probably would have had us dipping into the former tier 4. Tier 5, the 4 million for the not having a 1/12. I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe that would have cleared out tier 5. But I think if we're looking at the worst that could possibly happen with the state still, I think there's still a little bit more than what this would represent. And so I'll just kind of ask that question as to why we went with that, or if maybe that was a typo, or if it's something that we missed. Because if 6 million is really the worst cut that we can still expect, we at least need to recognize that, yes, if we have to cut 6 million because the state cut 6 million, this is what we'd be looking at.
So Dr. McCall, can you answer that question? Just to what is our current worst case scenario, I suppose?
Sure. And Director Dede, you can join in anytime if you like. But when we've gone through and taken a look at our FY20 into our, Dan, you've got to do your mic.
Dan, can you mute for just a moment?
Yeah. Okay. So, when we recently just reviewed our FY20 into FY21 budget, we, we're able to carry forward quite a bit of money. And, the other part of it is that we aren't touching excess and deficiency. So our E&D numbers are going to be higher by at least $450,000 than what we had anticipated. On top of the fact that, DESE has basically said, plan for like a 1/12 budget with extra funds for PPE. So what we're looking at is, if a worst case scenario, that was like the ultimate worst case scenario, the sky is falling. That there has never been an event that has been that catastrophic for a school district, at our level or in our area in Massachusetts, because there has been some type of bailout in some form or fashion. So there will be some type of federal bailout in terms of funds that come to schools via the state, and that will help make up the difference. I mean, the other thing that we have to think about is if we don't bring these people back, we're going to have a really hard time filling either classrooms or the opportunity for people to do online learning or remote learning. So it's I think prudent for us to, yes, not jump all the way through and say, everything's going to be fine. But have the understanding that we have to ensure that we're going to be able to educate our kids adequately. And with the number of reductions based upon a 10 million and based upon, you get rid of tier 5, you go into tier 4, there's still a lot of teachers. So this basically brought back 40 out of the 54 non-professional status teachers that we're still reducing 14. That's a lot. In my time, I can't remember in my tenure in this district over 21 years having a reduction of that amount for teachers. Dan, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, through the chair, that's a pretty good summation. And again, our FY21 state aid payments, specifically Chapter 70 school choice and the charter, charter reimbursement, those payments are based upon the final FY20 payments. So we're going with those numbers. Also, as we come to the end of FY20 and begin to wrap things up, we have picked up several more dollars, especially in terms of school choice and in circuit breaker. And we're not done yet. We have a couple more days to wrap up business. So all those, we look to make these adjustments in these tier reductions.
Thank you. Member Gustafson?
So I have two questions. My first is that I'm glad we're restoring teachers. I was curious if at some point, I was curious first when they would be notified of their reinstatement, so we're not the last to know. And second, if you would be able to provide us a list of those positions that would be restored, because I think some of the arts positions may have fallen into that batch, but I'm not sure. And I would like to know, since that was a big issue in our community. So that is a request that perhaps we could get that level of detail at some point, and how the positions correlated, how many of those are in tier 2 or 3, 2, so they're still being reduced, and how many were in 4 and 5, so they're being restored. The second question was just a general question about athletics. I know middle school athletics has been a popular topic in the community. I suspect that may be largely out of our control. I have heard a lot of things about the state probably not having athletics, at least in the fall. I would be shocked if they did. I just don't see how they possibly can. So I think we need to try to get some clarification on that, and also be honest with our community members about the fact that that's a real possibility that might be beyond our control. It might also benefit our budget, but it might be beyond our control. It's not just us taking it away. It's that really the state might do that on our behalf in the interest of safety. So that's a question. And my third is that, as you said, we still have 14 positions we're cutting. We still have a couple of positions in tier 1 that we wanted to put in this year that we're not being able to at this point. I'm thinking particularly of things like the counselors that really would be very beneficial in this current situation. And I would encourage the district to not stop looking for areas of reduction, not just the little things because the purchase orders work out a certain way and school choice and circuit breaker give us a little more money, but significant reductions that haven't been discussed in real time, like the salary freezes that the union hasn't talked about, or that's the first one that comes to mind because it's the largest. But there may be other things like that. I'd like us to not stop pursuing those if there is a way to not reduce positions. I think those conversations still need to be had, even if they're not ideal.
Thank you so much. We have 2 more members with questions, and then we are going to move on to the rest of our agenda, as that is our charge as a school committee. Member Haynes?
Okay, thank you. Malaya did ask my question, but I'll ask the administration as well. When will the teachers who are being brought back, when will they be notified?
So Director Carlson already has a letter composed, and we'll be sending that out tomorrow.
Thank you. Member Kirschenbaum?
Yes, thank you. Regarding the staff, we are going to be having a reduction in staff starting next year, even though it's not going to be as big as it was. We were losing new staff. Malia brought up the counselors that we were supposed to have and so forth. I would like to see an aggressive final draft of a staffing plan that when this is all over, we can say to the state, we can say, bring this to the feds and say, had this never happened, this is where we would have been on our timeline and our plan. Because when this is all over, I really feel strongly that we will have to be the biggest cheerleaders to rectify the losses. And we should not have to take 10 years to, pull ourselves out of this hole. That is a generation of kids lost if we are waiting that long. And so I would like to make sure that we keep our eye on the staffing plan so that we can advocate both locally and statewide and federally for much needed funds to make sure that we can become whole again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any quick parking lot issues in the report that we did not cover?
Megan, I have one quick thing.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. This was faster. I just wanted to say thank you to Christine Smith for the very detailed information on the extended school year, as well as the DESE plans for special education. I thought that was very helpful. And if anyone is watching at home, I hope they will dive into that, because really literally just about every piece of current information about special education students returning to school was shared with us, and all of the sublinks and all of their data. And I really found that very helpful, because we've been asking for more information and transparency in that area. So I just wanted to thank her for that and encourage our families to look into that.
Thank you so much. So this is actually a great transition as we are moving into the next part of our agenda, the recommendations requiring action by the school committee. The first on the agenda tonight is to support the resolution in support of education funding for COVID-19. Are there any motions on the floor?
I'll make the motion to accept.
Second.
Okay, in a matter of discussion, I would like to read the resolution aloud. This is a resolution supported by MASC that we as a school committee are taking up tonight to decide whether or not we would also like to support this resolution. Whereas if schools are to reopen this fall in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, it is the responsibility of each school district to do so safely and responsibly. And whereas it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that each school district is able to pay for the enormous additional staffing, transportation, and material expenses required to do this. And whereas the state cannot expect mandatory COVID-19 safety guidelines to be followed without ensuring that each school district has the funds required to implement these guidelines. Therefore, let it be resolved that the state must guarantee every school district fully reimbursement for whatever COVID-19 expenses are required to follow state mandates. We must ensure a statewide school reopening that is safe, responsible, and equitable. There can be no unfunded mandates for COVID-19. Is there any discussion regarding this resolution? Seeing none, we will start with a roll call vote starting from the top. Member
I think
Amo.
there's a question.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, did I miss? I'm sorry, Member Lavoie.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I fully support the resolution, but I wanted to make sure Dr. McCall or Director Dede can verify that we are accounting for any additional COVID-related expenses, so we can itemize those and be able to have a follow-up to this resolution with the state.
I was lip reading, Dr. McCall. You're
Sorry.
muted. You said you
Yeah.
are.
Yes, Matt, we are. So again, we've already purchased PPE, spent quite a bit of money, and we're in the process of keeping track of that. And Director Dede has an entire line just set aside for any PPE we're purchasing. And I can tell you, it's going to be substantial, absolutely substantial.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I'm sorry to miss yours, Member Lavoie. Okay, actually seeing none this time, we'll go to our roll call vote. Member Amos?
Amos votes yes.
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown?
Brown, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Yes.
Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Haynes?
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoie?
Lavoie, yes.
Member Long-Balil? Linda, you still with us? I think her volume isn't working, but yes, thank you. Member Ottmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith.
Smith, yes.
Member Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
Member Young.
Young, yes.
And the chair also votes yes. Motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda tonight is a second resolution. This resolution is to support anti-racism. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I'm also going to read this resolution that is also from MASC. Whereas schools have the responsibility to equip students with their civil rights of obtaining a free and appropriate education, it is the responsibility of each school to ensure we create a welcoming environment for all students. And whereas it is the responsibility that every district provide to district staff, including school committee members, annual professional development in diversity, equity, inclusion. And whereas every district will commit to recruiting and retaining a diverse and culturally responsive teaching workforce. And whereas every district will examine their policies for institutional and systemic racialized practices and implement change with sustainable policies that are evidence-based. And whereas each district will incorporate into their curriculum the history of racial oppression and works by Black authors and works from diverse perspectives. And whereas we as school leaders can no longer remain silent to the issues of racism and hate that continue to plague our public and private institutions. Resolved that the Wachusett Regional School District and all the school districts in the Commonwealth must guarantee that racist practices are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded and practiced for our students, families, faculty, and staff. We must ensure our own school culture and that of every district in the Commonwealth is anti-racist and acknowledges that all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. Is there discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote again. Member Amos.
Amos, yes.
Member Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett.
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown.
Brown, yes.
Member Gustafson.
Yes.
Member Haber.
Haber, yes.
Member Haynes.
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum.
Yes.
Member Lavoy.
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longboliel. I think she mouthed yes again. You're sorry about your mic, and she's in the chat as yes. Member Otmar.
Or yes.
Member Shapiro.
Member Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva.
Silva, yes.
Member Smith.
Smith, yes.
Member Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
Member Young.
Young, yes.
And the chair also votes yes. That resolution also passes unanimously. The next motion on the floor would be to approve the school committee 2020-2021 meeting calendar. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Just quickly to speak to the portions of this which I was involved in, I had asked the administration to revise the current school committee calendar to include meetings on a bi-weekly basis through at least September. We can come back and revisit the calendar at that time, but I thought it was very important through the summer. I know many of us are very busy and trying to enjoy some summer fun, but with how quickly things are progressing at the state level and at the local level, I didn't think it would behoove us to wait a month between meetings. So that is why you'll see on the updated calendar, there are more meetings than there were last time we looked at this. Is there any discussion on the floor? Member Lavoy, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I appreciate having more meetings than fewer and having them so we can continue to move forward. Have we thought about perhaps figuring out a way that we could meet in person, whether that be in a remote setting? I think it would be pertinent at some point in the future that we as a committee think about ways that we could potentially meet, and I open it up to administration to see if there's an opportunity to do that in a safe and effective manner.
Thank you, Member Lavoy. I do have been thinking about that. My concern would also be, I don't want to limit the public from attending. And if we are meeting in person, first we have to be spaced appropriately. But then with the 22 of us plus administration in the room plus Holden TV, we're kind of pushing towards 30. And to invite members of the public also in, I don't want to say like the first 5 people get to come in and the rest don't. But I would like to put that also on administration's plate when they feel safe, that we should be coming back into person, that we should do so. Member Kirschenbaum?
I also am glad to see that the additional meeting dates were put on to get us through the summer. I think on our last meeting, we had asked for a reflection on the meeting dates to make sure that they were accommodating of various members of our committee, to be mindful of their religious observances. And so I expect at this point that has been looked at and adjusted as needed.
Superintendent is nodding.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Rebecca went through it.
Thank you.
Member Gustafson?
Okay, one original question and one follow-up. On the meeting in person, I was going to ask about that, but I also would like to ask the administration to consider, when that does happen this fall or whenever, that there be some sort of hybrid model, because some of us are actually immunocompromised and trying to limit our interaction with people for various reasons, including myself. It's a completely biased question, but it's not because I don't think we should be gathering. It's just that some of us have expressed tonight that we're being excessively cautious for various reasons. So when that does happen, I hope that there would be some kind of hybrid model that still allows us to Zoom in, or whatever this is, whatever we are doing, so we can still be active participants. My other random question is that I know this past year our meetings overlapped with the Holden Board of Selectmen meetings. Did anyone look into that? I know I'd raised that question with the administration, and I raised it with the town and didn't hear back from them. But I'm just curious if that pattern has not been the case every year, but last year it was. So we always conflicted with their every other week meetings. Our meetings always conflicted, and I'm hoping that's not the case for every week this year.
So Rebecca did go through that. I think, Malaya, there may be 1 or 2, but Rebecca checked with Holden. I think we're good to go.
1 or 2 is fine. I just wanted to make sure hopefully it wasn't every week.
No, it's not everyone.
So
it's not like it was this year.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
That was Rebecca. She was good.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go back to a roll call vote, and we'll start at the bottom this time. Give Member Young a chance to go first. Member Young?
Young, yes.
Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
Member Williamson?
Williamson, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Long-Balil?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. My answer is yes.
And yes, I can hear you. Thank you. Member Lavoy?
Yes. Lavoy, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Haynes?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Member Brown?
Brown, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Amos?
Amos, yes.
The chair votes yes, and that also passes unanimously. I'm going to be passing over numbers 4 and 5 on the agenda as we are waiting to hear from Business Finance once they are able to meet. There are a number of budget transfers on the agenda tonight that were also on the agenda at our last meeting. These budget transfers have been discussed, and they are of a very timely manner as the district is trying to close out their FY20 accounts by Wednesday. So these do need some action. So do I have a motion on the floor to authorize a budget transfer of $312,171 from the instruction support appropriation to the benefits and insurance appropriation?
So move.
Second.
Director Didi, would you like to discuss this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The reason for this transfer is that we're looking to make adjustments between the general fund and several revolving funds, but primarily school choice, to bring forward a greater balance in school choice for the FY21 budget.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go back to our roll call vote, starting from the bottom again.
I'm sorry, Megan, I'm sorry. I just had a question. I wasn't able to get it out there fast enough. I just, and maybe I'm late to the party on this question, but this is coming from the instructional support appropriations. Can somebody help me understand what what we didn't get for the instructional support? Like, why is this money there, I guess is my question.
Through the chair, with the closure, we did realize a great deal of savings, instructional support. There was less spending in the various school accounts for the year. We did make a last minute purchase in the latter part of June for textbooks. So those costs were realized.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, now seeing none, we'll start from the bottom again. Member Young?
Young, yes.
Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
Member Williamson?
Williamson, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Longalil?
Yes.
Member Lavoy?
Boy, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Haynes?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Member Brown?
Brown, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
And Member Amos?
Amos, yes.
Chair votes yes, that passes unanimously. Next on our agenda tonight is to authorize a budget transfer of $42,476 from the operations and maintenance appropriation to the special education's tuitions appropriation. Is there a motion on the floor?
So move.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I owe again, Director Didi, is there some explanation to this transfer?
Through the chair, again, we did realize the savings with the closure. Obviously, our utilities, we realized the savings on utilities there. And what we're looking to do is to shift dollars from this appropriation to the special ed tuitions to bring forward an additional savings from circuit breaker, where we will increase the expense in the general fund and bring forward a greater value in circuit breaker. The estimated carry forward now in circuit breaker is approximately $800,000, assuming that this goes forward, estimated.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the floor? Questions for Director Didi? Seeing none, I believe. We'll go back to the top for the next couple. Member Amos?
Amos, yes.
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown,
Brown, yes.
Member Gustafson,
Gustafson, yes.
Member Haber,
Haber, yes.
Member Haynes,
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum,
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy,
Lavoy, yes.
Member Long Balil,
Yes.
Member Otmar,
Otmar, yes.
Member Shapiro,
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva,
Silva, yes.
Member Smith,
Smith, yes.
Member Williamson,
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland,
Woodland, yes.
Member Young.
Young, yes.
The chair votes yes. That also passes unanimously. Number 8 on our agenda tonight. To authorize the listed FY21 revolving funds in accordance with the MGL Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half, to be expensed under the direction of the superintendent of schools or designee, to be credited with the receipts from acknowledged revenue sources, to be expended for the respective stated purposes and not to exceed authorized amounts. Director Beatty?
Through the chair, this item was discussed by Finance at our meeting on June 17th, and it received support from Finance at that time. It was on the agenda for the meeting here on June 3rd. We just ran out of time that evening. It was on the agenda for Finance again this evening, but just more of an informational purposes there. These are our revolving funds, and it is required each year to bring these to the full school committee to vote the value that can be expensed. I did make some slight reductions in these funds given the activity over the past year, but I also made some adjustments too, in particular with circuit breaker and school choice. And the reason for those adjustments is that, again, as I said a moment ago, and as I've explained to Finance in all of our meetings, that we're looking to bring forward a sum of money for both circuit breaker and school choice. In FY21, this is the first year in probably a number of years that the district has brought forward funds from those to revolving funds. And we're also looking to anticipate state aid for FY21 as well. So all those were taken into consideration in terms of these values here.
Thank you. Are there discussions or questions?
Megan, I don't believe we so moved or seconded this motion.
Do we have a motion? Would anybody like to move it? Member Brown?
So moved.
Second.
Now moved and seconded. A little discussion out of order. My apologies as we get later into the evening. Are there questions or comments from members? Seeing none, go back to our roll call vote from the top. Member Amos?
Amos, yes.
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown?
Brown, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Member Haynes? Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Haynes?
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Long-Balil?
Yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Williamson?
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
Member Young?
Young, yes.
The chair votes yes. So-
Megan, I'm here too, but I vote yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
That also passes unanimously. Number 9 on our agenda tonight. To authorize the listed FY21 student activity funds in accordance with MGL Chapter 71, Section 47, for funds belonging to the students and not to the district or school control, to be credited with receipts from acknowledged revenue sources, to be expended for the respective stated purposes, and not to exceed the authorized amounts. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Director Deedy?
Through the chair, again, under Chapter 71, Section 47, this is a requirement every year where these funds need to be voted by school committee, and our auditors look for this information every year when they do the audit of student activity funds. Again, this information was presented to Finance back at a meeting on June 17th, and they gave us their support. Again, it was on the agenda for June 30. We ran out of time that evening, so it was pushed out to this evening. It was on Finance's agenda this evening, but again, just for more or less informational purposes. And the values, I did a review of the actuals for FY18 and FY19, and these figures here are based on that data there.
Thank you. I believe there's already a question from Member Gustafson. Malaya, do you have a question?
I'm back. I'm sorry, I couldn't get my mic to work. This is just an explanation question. It comes up every year we do this. Can you explain, particularly to the newer members, I know these are student funds, but why are the values so much higher? For example, the high school has something like $500,000. What kinds of things do those cover? I don't expect those are all, I mean, I have an idea, but I know this comes up every year when we do this, and we have a lot of new members. So I wanted to ask that question.
So through the chair, there are various activities that each club has, and oftentimes the value associated with that activity depends upon how successful they are. There are some there may be activity at the high school, for example, and I'll just say the math club. They may have an event. And it may not be as successful, say, as if they were having a dance. And again, those particular events have some end up to the good, and others may break even or may even lose money with that event. Again, the figures that you see there, I looked at the actuals for FY18 and 19, and these numbers here are pretty much spot on with that activity.
Does that answer your question, Malia? Member Gustafson, does it answer your question, or do you need further clarification? Yes, it does. Okay. Do other members have questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the roll call vote. Member Amos?
Amos, yes.
Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown?
Brown, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Haynes?
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbeliel?
Yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Williamson?
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
And Member Young?
Young, yes.
The chair votes yes. That motion passes unanimously. Next, our agenda, number 10, to appoint an ad hoc subcommittee on diversity, equity, and anti-racism. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Fourth and fifth.
Thank you guys so much. Just to speak to this for a moment myself, the moment I was appointed chair through your vote, this was the first thing that I wanted to do. From hearing from our constituents, from our students in our community, it is clear that action must take place. Words are one thing, and the words from Dr. McCall and various school committee members have been powerful, but they just have presentation value. If we stop short here, we stop short on the actual mission that these words have. We need action, swift, decisive, and comprehensive action in this district. So the charge of this subcommittee will be 3-tiered, and it really kind of stems from the anti-racism resolution that we read earlier tonight. I would be looking for this subcommittee to be looking towards 3 things: to review and perhaps revise curriculum in all areas, to give voice to those of color, and to promote multiculturalism in our schools. Second, to form a racism intervention and prevention plan similar to our bullying prevention and intervention plan, so that those who are targets of racism in our district have a very specific and outlined course of action they can take in order to ensure that action never happens again. And to third, provide professional development to our teachers on diversity, equity, and anti-racism, and review our hiring practices so that we can open our arms to more diverse teachers, administrators, paraprofessionals, janitors, and other staff who work in our district, so that we can better represent the multiculturalism that makes our district in our country great. And finally, simply put, Black Lives Matter, and us as a school committee need to ensure that these Black lives know that they matter. Those who are interested in joining the subcommittee, please send me an email if it is so appointed tonight, this week, and we'll make sure this charge begins immediately. Is there further discussion on the floor or questions?
I have my hand raised.
I have my hand raised as
I got
well.
you. So I have Member Lavoy and Member Kirschenbaum. They were 1 and 2. Member Lavoy, I think you beat her by a second.
I'm not going to beat her. She's got all good, insightful comments. I should probably wait to hear her speak first.
I guess you get to go first.
So my question is this, and I appreciate this subcommittee. I really appreciate the charges, but I typically see an ad hoc subcommittee as one that is formed, and then when charges are met, it's discharged and taken away. So I would actually propose that we look at our bylaws and think about creating a standing subcommittee and look at some of those charges and see how a standing subcommittee might interact with an existing subcommittee. For instance, one of the charges on reviewing and revising curriculum would be a really good opportunity to interact with an education subcommittee. Adherence with a bully, something similar to a bullying intervention plan, that's something that's going to need continuous work. So my concern is a subcommittee, an ad hoc subcommittee is going to be discharged, and that work is just going to fall dormant until a new ad hoc subcommittee is reappointed. So for the new members of the committee, the superintendent goals and evaluation subcommittee never existed years ago. And there was a need brought to the committee, and that was formed. We can always disband a standing subcommittee, but I would definitely look at supporting a standing committee as opposed to an ad hoc subcommittee.
Thank you. Member Kirschenbaum, you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Lavoy, for your very kind words, number one. Number two, I'd like to echo what you said about making it a standing committee. In addition, I not seeing the actual language of the 3 charges. I just only heard them. I tried to write them down. I have a little conflict with some of the wording to it. And so I'd like to be able to refine that wording a little bit more. I'm not sure that I want to support the motion, but I'm not sure I can support it as written. Like, for example, I think it said something like provide professional development.
Right, would be recommend professional development.
Yeah, right. I just want to make sure that we're wording it correctly.
Yes,
On that.
I'm sorry for that.
Yep, that's fine. And then also, I think review and revise curriculum I think we can make recommendations.
There would be recommendations as well. Yeah,
Okay.
you're correct. You're correct.
Okay, then I would be able to support that then.
Thank you. See, you are the eloquent one tonight. You should be doing all the talking. Member Gustafson.
Yeah, I just forgot my question. Shoot. Okay. It's getting late. So one question is that I do agree with the notion that this probably is useful as a standing committee. I disagree with the notion that while it is related to what existing committees are doing, those committees are already very busy. I think particularly of Ed Sub, which already has a mile-long list of policies, and I think this work might get lost if it was left just to the existing committees that already have a very large workload. So I definitely think it needs to be a standing committee that can certainly interact with other committees, and that's what we all do anyways. We consider different things, but not in a silo. We share information with other committees, we solicit their input, we bring it back to the full committee, we're all connected. So I think that's essential. I also had a question though about that. I mean, I understand the ad hoc notion is probably so it can get started a lot more quickly than the time it would take to go through our bylaws and revise them to create a new standing subcommittee, if my understanding is correct. So is it possible in that case that we could create, I don't know if you'd want to call it a task force or something less formal while we work on creating the bylaws, or if we create an ad hoc subcommittee while we work on the bylaws or to create a permanent committee and then transition it to that whenever that we reach that point. I don't think I would rule out creating an ad hoc subcommittee as long as we have some longer term process. Also, there is really no rule, as I understand it, to how long an ad hoc subcommittee can exist. So I think it may be a valuable workaround while we work on a longer term solution. So those are my thoughts.
And that was my intent, Member Gustafson, and they don't have, the ad hoc does not have a finality to when she has to be discharged.
Right. So that may be a valid way of doing it so we can get started on the work quickly, which we need to do, while we also, maybe one of the things the committee can work with you on is how, and the district, is how to move forward to make it a more permanent, working group or whatever we want to call it. Because I'm sure it will involve more than just school committee members as we do this work. So,
yes. Member Haynes.
Thanks. And my questions have been answered. Thanks.
And then student member Catherine, you had a question? We can't put our questions in the chat. Yep, take your time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm wondering how students will be heard, because a lot of the words you heard were from students, and a lot of the students are the people that are raising majority of the concerns. Not to say that no one else is concerned, but I know that we're not allowed to join subcommittees as student reps. So how are we going to make it so that students feel representative and represented on this board, and make it so that they understand that there's change being made in the future?
And that is a good question, and one that the subcommittee would take up. Yes, typically the student reps are not part of the subcommittees, but we would be working through survey data and administration in order to get feedback from students. Member Kirschenbaum had a point of clarification. Do we need to amend the motion formally for the misspoken with the recommendation not changing the curriculum, but recommendations to look at reviewing and revising? I would like to make sure that is done correctly. Yes, and I will.
Also, do we want to amend to also make this a task force for the time being versus a ad hoc committee, or does that matter? I'm just not sure where we are right now.
You could amend the motion on the floor to create a task force, but then it would not be a subcommittee of the school committee, that would be something you'd be charging the district with doing. That might have some representation from school committee, but would also kind of include, kind of the same way that the task force worked through the reopening plan.
Thank you.
Member Lavoy has a point of order question, and that trumps regular hand raising.
I know there's 3 questions, so I'm hoping perhaps if Rebecca, Madam Secretary, is on the call, perhaps she could read our bylaws and what it says about a standing subcommittee, because I do believe that a motion can be made to revise this to be a standing subcommittee because it was on the agenda tonight, but I do want to clarify that with our bylaws before making that motion.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, are you still on the call tonight?
Nope, I left. I'm gone.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Hold on a second.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to read the whole section. It's section 4. Can you hear me fine?
Yep, we're listening.
The chair shall appoint standing subcommittees. No member of the committee shall be appointed to more than 3 standing subcommittees. The chair may appoint additional ad hoc subcommittees as necessary. Should a management subcommittee be appointed, the chair of the committee shall serve as the chair of the management subcommittee. The vice chair of the school committee shall serve as the vice chair of the management subcommittee. The vice chair of the committee and the chairs of the standing subcommittee shall be appointed members of the management subcommittee. The chair shall appoint a chair to each standing subcommittee or ad hoc subcommittee. Each subcommittee shall elect its vice chair. The committee, by a majority vote of the membership, may require the establishment of a standing or ad hoc subcommittee. Then it goes on to no more than 1/2 of the membership can participate.
So, point of order, I believe that the motion could be amended to be a standing subcommittee. So I'll wait for a turn on that, as I did not have my hand raised. It was just a point of order. But if I heard that correctly, I believe that could be amended to do that.
I believe I heard the same thing. But I do want to get to Member Otmar, Member Young, Member Longwheel, and Member Gustafson, unless there is a motion on the floor to make an amendment. Member
I'm good.
Otmar.
I had just pulled up the section 4 of our bylaws, and I was going to say the same thing that has already eloquently been laid out. So it's already in there, so we don't have to worry about making a change to our bylaws.
Member Young.
2 quick things. One, to answer a little bit more of Catherine's question. Any subcommittee meeting is open to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely, you'll find that subcommittee meetings are a little less formal, and the public tends to participate a little bit more in the meeting. There's still some order to it, but I think any student would absolutely be welcome during any subcommittee meeting. If there are going to be a lot of students showing up to one meeting, maybe just let the chair know so they can make sure it's at a place that is large enough, or if it's online, whatever. But that's definitely a recommendation I would make. And 2, correct me if I'm wrong, but the bylaws actually just state that the chair can appoint subcommittees. And it doesn't necessarily need action by the committee. So based on that, I would like to amend the motion on the floor to state that the committee supports the chair appointing a standing subcommittee on diversity, equity, and anti-racism.
There's amendment to the motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Member Brown. At this point, our discussion would revolve around the amendment, not the original motion on the floor. Member Lavoy has a point of order.
Yeah, I would agree with Member Young's motion, but I do believe that it still needs to be voted on. It does specifically state that a new standing subcommittee would need to be voted on by the majority of the committee.
That was my interpretation as well.
Do you see where that is?
It's
It was
right.
the last one that Rebecca read.
Want me to reread that quick paragraph?
Yeah, just that portion there about voting, please.
The committee, by a majority vote of the membership, may require the establishment of a standing or ad hoc subcommittee.
There you go. Okay.
Since your
I would like.
would you like to?
Can I?
Motion?
I'll ask Matt because he's really good at this stuff. How
But
can I pull that back and resubmit it?
Your motion is already moved or seconded, though, at this point. So I do believe at this point we have to vote on it.
Or he can withdraw his motion.
He could withdraw his motion.
Okay. I will withdraw my motion.
So the motion to amend the motion on the floor has been withdrawn. So we go back to the original motion, which is to appoint an ad hoc subcommittee on diversity, equity, and anti-racism. Next, after Member Young, was Member Long-Bolio.
My question's been answered.
Member Otmar has a point of order.
So I guess just to add on to the language in the bylaws, it states the committee may require the establishment. And as I read that, that means that we can, as a committee, we can vote and say, we're going to add this standing subcommittee. But it also says the chair shall appoint. So by default, as a committee, if we do nothing, my reading of this is that as the chair, you can still appoint it all entirely on your own.
Correct.
And we can potentially vote to undo it.
It was the chair's intent to have the support of the subcommittee on this before moving forward. Or if you didn't support it, I would not move forward with it. So that was the purpose of putting it on the agenda specifically. So we got to Long-Bolio, Otmar. Malaya, you had a question.
I think there was a point of order after me, though. So
I almost got to you. Member LaVoy.
So not to belabor the point, but the reason why it says that the chair can appoint a subcommittee is because our bylaws used to specifically state the actual subcommittees in each of the bylaws and above that. And the reason why it's there is to say that you can appoint any standing subcommittee. The establishment of a new one does require a vote. Our last standing subcommittee that we established was done by a vote in a similar format to a motion. So I think we have to follow precedent here. And it's my understanding from those previous dialogues that that is the proper point of order. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you, Member LaVoy. And again, that was my intent.
Yep.
Member Gustafson.
Okay, I'll be quick because I just noticed the time. So
yeah, I want to try to get this vote in.
So my question was really about, I respect your intent, so I think we certainly should honor that regardless of if we have to or not. I think that was your intent to get our support and we should move forward with that. My question was around your broader intent and the notion of students having input. I wonder, do you see this as a limited scope committee that is dealing with just policy and curriculum kind of issues, or do you see this as part of a larger district conversation, such as a task force or something that would also involve students and the curriculum development team and teachers and input from different stakeholders? Or does the district have a plan in that regard that this committee would feed into that may help?
So to quickly answer, yes, I wanted the subcommittee to meet and to work on policy related issues and then make some recommendations to the administration. And if they believe a task force would be the appropriate manner to get better feedback, then they would do so.
Right. I just wanted to clarify because we hadn't heard from them about their thoughts. So thank you.
Yep. Member Haynes.
So I just wanted to, Member Young had made an amendment, took it back. I would like to make an amendment that we make this a standing subcommittee.
There is an amendment on the floor to make the ad hoc subcommittee on diversity, equity, and anti-racism to amend that to be a standing subcommittee.
Second.
Okay.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion on the floor regarding the amendment? Seeing no discussion on the floor regarding the amendment, we'll go to a roll call vote. So this is to just change it from an ad hoc to a standing, just so everybody understands.
Yeah.
Member Amos.
Yes.
Member Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett.
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown.
Brown, yes.
Member Gustafson.
Gustafson, yes.
Member Haber.
Haber, yes.
Member Haynes. Jeff?
Yes, sorry about that.
No worries. Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbeliel?
Yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Williamson?
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
Member Young?
Young, yes.
And the chair also votes yes. We're going back to discussion on the newly amended motion, which is to create a standing subcommittee. Member Lavoy, I believe you also had a hand.
I was going to make the motion, but Member Haynes made it. So,
Is there any further discussion before we vote on the motion on the floor? And thank you guys for using the hand features so well tonight. Everything moved on very smoothly so far. Okay, roll call vote. Member Amos.
Amos, yes.
Member Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett.
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown.
Brown, yes.
Member Gustafson.
Gustafson, yes.
Member Haber.
Haber, yes.
Member Haynes.
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum.
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy.
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbeliel.
Yes.
Member Otmar.
Otmar, yes.
Member Shapiro.
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva.
Silva, yes.
Member Smith.
Smith, yes.
Member Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
Member Young.
Young, yes.
The chair votes yes, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Is there a point of order anybody would like to raise? No? Okay.
Good night, Megan.
Yes.
I'm just going to ask this because our meetings are going very long. We have, I think, 7 sets of minutes to approve. Is that worth extending the meeting to get to some of those? Because that alone might take about 20 minutes to roll call every one of them, and some of them are quite old. So I'll ask your discretion on that, but it's a question.
That would be up to the approval of the committee.
I would suggest if people are amenable to that, that it may be worth doing, but I'm not the only one, so.
Right now, I don't have a point of order on the floor.
I will make a motion to extend until 10:30.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on 10:30? Not to exceed 10:30. We can end before that. Yeah. Member Amos.
Amos, yes.
Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Bennett.
Yes.
Brown.
Brown, reluctantly, yes.
Yes.
Haber. We're doing better than last week, guys.
Yes.
Haynes.
Yes.
Kirschenbaum.
No.
Lavoy.
Sorry, I like you guys, but no.
Longbeliel.
Yes.
Otmar.
Yes.
Shapiro.
Shapiro, yes.
Silva.
Silva, no.
Smith.
Smith, yes.
Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
Young.
Young, yes.
Chair votes yes. Madam Secretary, is that motion approved?
Yes, 15-3.
Okay. So next, unfinished business. We don't have anything in that. Moving on to the secretary's report. There are a number of minutes that have been sitting here for quite some time. And just a clarification with the minutes in A and the minutes in B. These minutes are to, they're not to approve the executive session minutes at that time. Your approval would then move to make that public for their release.
They're to be approved and released.
Approved and released. Okay. So the first is approval of the executive session minutes of the Wachusett Regional School District held on March 9th, 2020 as enclosed. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
And is there any discussion of those minutes? They've been included in your packets. Seeing none. Amos.
Yes.
Ayala.
Ayala, yes, but there's
Bennett.
a hand raised.
There was a hand.
There was a hand raised.
Yeah, that's me, Megan.
Yes, Member Shapiro.
Yeah, I have a question. Is there any opportunity, again, I don't know how this is done before, but is there any opportunity to us approving these in batches, like,
No, they have
this
to
date
be-
and that date? They have to be done individually?
Yeah, in case there's discussion on individual minutes or clarifications or, things that need to be amended.
No, just asking if you can ask if there's a question on in each one and then approve in batch. No? Okay, just trying to move things along. That's all.
I know, we've just been kicking the can on these for so long that they just got to get done.
Okay.
So we did Amos, we did Ayala, Bennett,
Yes.
Brown,
Brown, yes.
Gustafson,
Yes.
Haber,
Yes.
Haynes,
Yes.
Kirschenbaum,
Kirschbaum, yes.
Lavoy,
Lavoy, yes.
Longbilio,
Yes.
Otmar,
Otmar abstain.
Shapiro,
Shapiro abstain.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Williamson,
Abstain.
Woodland,
Woodland, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
and the chair votes yes. Next is the approval of the executive session minutes of the Wachusett Regional School District held on May 11, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none. Amos,
Yes.
Ayala,
Yes.
Bennett,
Bennett, yes.
Brown,
Brown, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Haber, Haber,
Yes.
Haynes,
Yes.
Kirschenbaum,
Yes.
Lavoy,
Lavoy, yes.
Longbilio,
Yes.
Otmar,
Otmar, yes.
Shapiro,
Shapiro abstain.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Smith,
Smith, yes.
Williamson,
Williamson, abstain.
Woodland,
Woodland, yes.
Young,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Next is the approval of the 1,344th regular meeting minutes of the Wachusett Regional School District Committee held on May 26, 2020 as enclosed. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there a discussion? Seeing none. Back to the top. Amos,
Amos abstain.
Ayala,
Ayala, yes.
Bennett,
Yes.
Brown,
Brown, yes.
Gustafson,
Yes.
Haber,
Yes.
Haynes,
Yes.
Kirschenbaum,
Yes.
Lavoy,
Lavoy, yes.
Longbilio,
Yes.
Otmar,
Otmar, yes.
Shapiro,
Shapiro abstain.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Smith, Christina,
Yes. Sorry, yes.
Williamson,
Williamson, abstain.
Woodland,
Woodland, yes.
Young,
Yes.
The chair votes yes, those are approved. Next on our agenda tonight is the approval of the 1,345th regular meeting of the Wachusett meeting minutes of the Wachusett Regional School District Committee held on June 8th, 2020 as enclosed. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing none. Amos.
Amos abstain.
Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Bennett.
Bennett, yes.
Brown.
Brown, yes.
Gustafson.
Gustafson, yes.
Haber.
Yes.
Haynes.
Yes.
Kirschenbaum.
Yes.
Lavoy.
Lavoy, yes.
Longbeliel.
Yes.
Otmar.
Otmar, yes.
Shapiro.
Shapiro abstain.
Silva.
Silva, yes.
Thank you. Smith.
Yes.
Williamson.
Abstain.
Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
Young.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Next on our agenda would be the approval of the organization meeting minutes of the Wachusett Regional School District Committee held on June 30th, 2020 as enclosed. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the floor? Seeing none. One more time, let's do it. Amos.
Amos, yes.
Ayala.
Ayala abstain.
Bennett.
Yes.
Brown.
Brown, yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Heber.
Yes.
Haynes.
Abstain.
Kirschenbaum.
Yes.
Lavoy.
Lavoy, yes.
Longbeliel.
Yes.
Otmar.
Otmar, yes.
Shapiro.
Shapiro, yes.
Silva.
Silva, yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
Young.
Young, yes.
The final group of minutes is the approval of the 1,346 regular meeting minutes of the Wachusett Regional School District Committee held on June 30th, 2020 as enclosed. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing none. Amos.
Amos, yes.
Ayala.
Ayala abstain.
Bennett.
Yes.
Brown.
Brown, yes.
Jefferson.
Yes.
Haber.
Yes.
Haynes.
Abstain.
Kirschenbaum.
Yes.
Lavoy.
Happy birthday, Member Gustafson. Yes.
I don't know if that was a point of order, Mr. Lavoy.
I'm sorry, but nobody said it, and I know we're running out of time here, so I just wanted to say I'm running out of time. I'm fading quickly here. My vote is yes, and I want to say happy birthday.
Longbeliel.
Yes, and I second the happy birthday to Malia.
Now it's official. All right.
It's
Otmar.
official on the record now. Thank you, guys.
Otmar, yes.
Shapiro.
Shapiro, yes.
After 10 o'clock, we all get a little wonky. Okay, Silva. Awesome. Are you still with us?
Yep. Silva, yes.
Smith.
Happy birthday, Malaya, and Smith, yes.
Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
And Young.
Young, yes.
And the chair votes yes. That is important to do. We gotta do our business. Next on the agenda is the treasurer's report and financial statements. Please direct those questions to Director DD. There are no committee reports that I know of. I don't believe any committees have met yet. It would be my intention as chair to make sure those committees form and decide in their first meeting and to begin their business as soon as possible. I'm going to be passing over agenda item H from the ad hoc subcommittee to negotiate the superintendent's contract. As we do have one small piece of business we did not get to, which was a change in the superintendent's job description. And I'll be putting that item on the agenda for next meeting. There are no building committees, and we do not yet have school council reports, but as of today, all schools have a have a member that is appointed. So thank you all for volunteering and being a part of school councils. Next on the agenda is a public hearing, number 2, and I did have a few public committee come in to us during our meeting tonight. So our next reading comes from Jennifer Pioli, who lives at 99 Pleasant Street in Holden, Massachusetts. She writes, "Dear WRSD Committee, after reading through the reopening task force report, I have 2 specific concerns. One, in the report, it is recommended that older students wipe down their own surfaces. However, I strongly urge students to properly wash hands after doing so, as chemicals are not meant for skin contact. I'm concerned that this will not happen and students will be exposed to unnecessary chemicals, and there will not be time or knowledge for them to do so. Second, in the report, surfaces are planned to be cleaned and wiped down multiple times during the day. However, you'll need to take into account additional time for proper usage of the chemical. Most disinfectants require 3 to 10 minute dwell time where the product remains wet on the surface. Students should not be allowed to touch surfaces while wet. The product may not work correctly, and students are now in contact with a chemical that needs to wash off. Thank you all for your hard work." There is a second comment that came in as well from Lynn Henley on 11 Wyoming Drive in Holden, Massachusetts. "Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to comment on tonight's meeting. 1, it is curious that there's been no survey yet of families, as noted by one committee member, to help determine families that do not intend to send their children back to school this year. 2, to continue on Member Shapiro's comments about disinfecting considerations. DESI's use of research about child transmission is in fact too generalized and therefore misleading about lower risk. Recent research in other countries that have reopened their schools, such as cited in this Sunday's New York Times, know that transmission risk increases with age. Therefore, it might be wiser to consider remote learning for middle and high, while elementary students might have some planned days of in-school learning. It was noted that DESI is giving consideration to an altered school calendar, which might mean further days required for students. However, there was no mention of MCAS. What is the school committee and superintendent's view about waiving MCAS given the loss of time on learning last spring and future loss coming next year? With the elimination of tier 4 and 5 cuts, it would be beneficial to confirm for the community that the middle school foreign language and elementary music may continue to be available and fully staffed. Thank you again for communicating my comments and the work that you do as a committee." That is our second public hearing. Is there any new business that members would like to put on an agenda for a future meeting? Seeing none, I would be amenable to an emotion on the floor for adjournment.
So
moved. Popular. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. 10:10. My goal is 10 o'clock, guys. I'm getting there. Member Amos.
Yes.
Member Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett.
Yes.
Brown.
Brown, yes.
Birthday girl Gustafson.
Yes, and thank you all.
Haber.
Yes.
Haynes.
Yes.
Kirschenbaum.
Yes.
Lavoy.
Lavoy, yes.
Longbeliel.
Yes.
Otmar.
Otmar, yes.
Shapiro.
Shapiro, yes.
Silva.
Silva, yes.
Smith.
Smith, yes.
Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
Young.
Young, yes.
And the chair votes yes. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you all so much for everything tonight.
Good job.
Thank
Megan.
you. Good night.
Good job.
Take care. Good night.
Good night.